I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham and I am back. Yes, I know I've been away for Christmas. It feels like a very long time ago. 2 weeks ago it was when we had the last show that we did. I think it was Friday the 20th of December. It is now the 30th of December, almost New Year's Eve. We're going to wish you a very happy New Year. But we've got lots to do between now and 10 o'clock. Emma Wolf is here with us to help us go through the morning papers. Now, when I left, we had the worst government of all time. Funnily enough, now that I'm back, they're still there. But we've had a couple of polls done in the meantime, which have actually said that if we had an election tomorrow, guess what would happen? They wouldn't be the government anymore. They would actually lose so many seats that half of the cabinet would be wiped out completely, which tells you just how badly it's going for old Keir Starlin, because he hasn't got any better over the course of the last few days. And in fact, he won Plank of the Year as well. So congratulations, Sir Keith. Well done indeed. We'll be talking some more about that coming up. It's a huge feud going on between the Tories and the Reform Party. Kemi Badenoch's apparently accused Reform of cooking the books, which is pretty good coming from them. We'll be finding out later on from Reform what their next move is likely to be. Also, stories on the front pages this morning. They want to decolonise the school curriculum. Yeah, that nice Bridget Phillipson, who reckons that the middle classes are all very much in support of taking schools and giving them more taxes to pay and making parents pay so they can have 6,500 more teachers. Absolutely ridiculous. I know this is supposed to be the intro to the show, but it could be the whole show. We've got councils letting staff work from beaches in Ibiza in Australia. Brilliant. And also, we're going to be talking about Jimmy Carter, who died overnight at the age of 100. Quite a character he was. Also, Labour's plan won't ease the cost of living squeeze, according to voters. They just don't believe a word that Keir Starmer says. It's as simple as that. 0344 499 1000. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, here's how you do it.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always.
Morning, Mike. It's Fiona in Dorset.
Hi, Mike. Kate from Leeds.
Hi, Mike. Junior from Bristol.
Loving the extended show. 4 hours of Mike Graham, Monday to Friday. Loving it.
Brilliant.
Also, front page of the Times, the rising toll of young adults who are too ill to work. More women under 25 have long-term sickness than are looking after their children full-time. Goodness gracious me. This is, of course, Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Let's get it on. 5 minutes past 6. A very, very good morning to you, and it's great to be back, actually. I've got the slight back end of a cold, so do forgive me if I did a bit of coughing and spluttering and snivelling. But Emma Wolf is here. Very good morning to you, Emma.
Good morning.
Did you have a nice Christmas?
Lovely Christmas, yeah.
This is the time...
Glad it's over.
Yeah, this is when you come back to work and everybody goes, did you have a nice Christmas? And you can't really tell them if you didn't, can you? If you didn't have a nice Christmas, you're not going to say,
actually, it was crap. Do you know what I'm really bored of, Mike? Is saying, hello, a message, hello, how are you? I hope you had a nice Christmas. Can't we just agree that everybody hopes you had a nice Christmas and we don't need to keep saying it and keep saying it?
Also, Happy New Year.
Oh,
do you say it today, tomorrow,
for the rest
Tuesday,
of January?
For the rest of January. I mean, we always have this conversation. When do you stop saying Happy New Year to people if you haven't seen them?
Or you just don't say it at all.
Just don't say it.
No, happy 25.
Yeah, okay.
Happy 25.
Well, I'm happy with that. We'll go with that. Now, we've got a couple of big stories coming up as well. I want to talk, there's on the news a story about driving and people driving down the wrong side of the motorway. Yeah. I saw, and I'm just going to put this out there because people might have thought that this is something that's now happening more and more. Over the last couple of days, I was driving around various different places, southeast England. I saw two people with German number plates driving, very happy to have people come here and be tourists and all that, but literally turning right on a traffic light, going into the wrong side of the road. One guy did, and just started driving down the wrong side of the road. I'm going, this is the middle of London. The other one turned into the wrong side of a sort of parking area and went to go to a drive-through coffee shop, famously named. It starts with C, ends with A, and he went the wrong way up into the drive-through.
Don't you think, though?
And I'm thinking... There's arrows and everything. I mean, we've all driven in foreign countries. How are people driving the wrong side of the road?
But don't you think the road systems are increasingly completely nonsensical as well? I mean, you have to admit that even driving around central London, all these low traffic neighbourhoods where you literally, I mean, where we live, you just see people driving around for hours. So that's meant to cut pollution. I was driving around the back of King's Cross just yesterday or the day before, and suddenly the road that I normally used to use has been blocked off by a load of plant pots. I'm going, where am I supposed to go now then? And the Mayor of London has introduced a very confusing system with absolutely no mandate from anybody. I mean, you talk to cabbies and they're in despair at how they get around. Don't get me started on that. Right. And then, of course, you go down the wrong road and you get slapped with a massive fine. And then you get, a massive fine for driving down your own street. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the front pages this morning. The Times has got rising toll of young adults too ill to work. Young women are more likely to be off work due to sickness than because they are looking after children. I'm sorry, I'm not buying this. No. I'm really not. Well, you know what, Mike? You reap what you sow. We brought up a generation of, internet-addicted, COVID, lockdown, damaged young people. Yeah. Only a quarter of people... Are they damaged, though? They are all damaged. They are all got anxiety, got depression, got mental health. Right. And they are not working. And 25%, only 25% of these young people who are not working, not in education, not in training, say they want to work. Right. So 3/4 of them are happy, can't be bothered or happy to sit on benefits. Yes. And I've written for 10 years about mental health. I'm very, very sympathetic to people who have genuine mental health issues, of course. But we have a real problem here. We have young men and young women who are simply not starting in any kind of career at all. No. They're on benefits. In fact, the young women, it's an interesting stat that, it's now more young women just off work ill with mental health problems than are staying at home to look after young children. Right. I mean, wait till they have children. Then they can really have worries about mental health, because being a parent is quite tough, actually, as you well know. Yeah. Birth rate has been falling, particularly amongst young people. Official figures released before Christmas now show economic inactivity remains at near record of 9.3 million people. The benefits bill, what is it going to sort to? I think it's $1 billion by the end of the decade or something. But, I mean, at the same time, we go to the shops and they're absolutely rammed full of people, right? Yep. People are buying everything up. You can't buy certain things because they've been sold out for months and months and months. So a lot of these people are living reasonably well. How about this for a proposition? Maybe some of them are not working, but are working on the black economy. I think some of them not paying any tax. Working on the black economy. I think some of them have just been signed off by their doctors. And you say, is it really the internet addiction thing? I think it is. Yeah. I think when you have 10 years, effectively 10 years of young people who've just grown up, not interacting with other people really, many of them not attending school absences are at an all-time high, with no incentive to work, and they see other people coming to this country and just getting whatever they want. I do think we have a major kind of systemic problem here.
Right.
Until you start saying to people, get off your backside. And think about what my father would have said. He would have said, get off your backside and go and find a job.
I think it's got to be more draconian than that. I think you have to say...
Well, that's what I'm trying to be draconian without swearing on air.
Well, no, I mean, not, you know, get back to work, but actually, if you don't get back to work, the benefits are going to end.
But that's what I mean.
Right?
You don't get benefits, you go and work.
According to these figures here from the Office of National Statistics, in 2019, there were 153,200 women aged 16 to 24 looking after family, double the number who were on long-term sick, which was 71,000. But last year, the numbers switched over, and now it's the other way around.
But, yes, exactly. And when you talk to doctors, they are terrified. They have to sign people off. If you go to them and say, I have this mental health issue. We've brought up a generation of young people who think that, you know, feeling down is a mental health issue. It's not. We all have bad days. We all have good days. Then we've brought them up telling them that things like anxiety disorders are a thing.
Right.
No, everybody gets nervous. Everybody gets worried.
Right.
You know, of course there are serious...
The whole point of socialisation is that you conquer that and you might not feel like talking to anybody.
Yes.
But you go to work and you start talking to people.
You go to a job interview. You turn up.
Right.
I mean, young people don't turn up to job interviews because they say, why can't I do it online?
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. Louise Murphy from the Resolution Foundation, the think tank, says it's probably good news that fewer people are out of work to care for family, allowing more women to work. They don't get it, do they? There is this worrying trend of more young people not being in education or work because of ill health. This is the trouble with all these think tanks. They always go, the problem is society is creating people who are sick. No, it isn't.
No.
Society is exactly the same as it was. People are just pretending that they're now sicker than they ever were.
They're pretending, but also we're pathologising normal human experience. And the fact is, I think the birth rate thing is a bit of a... It's a bit of a kind of red herring because women are having babies a lot later. So you are going to have young people in their early 20s who aren't staying out to look after kids because they're having their kids when they're 30. But also, people are not getting married and having children because no one is meeting it. I mean, we have really...
There's plenty of people having kids. It's just there are certain groups of people not having kids. I mean, middle-class women are not having kids, right?
Well, but they're having them older. But also, younger people are not meeting each other because they're terrified. If they try and kiss a girl in a bar, they'll be arrested for
quite right too.
assault. So there's a lot of issues there.
There's also women who I've heard talking, saying we don't want to have any children because of the climate crisis.
I know.
You know, we don't want to bring any children into the world because it won't be safe for them.
All this nonsense.
I mean, for God's sake.
No,
really?
That's just complete.
I mean, funnily enough, there's a climate story today in the Telegraph, which I've got here somewhere, which is complete and utter load of old cobblers, right? Climate change threatens to devastate the value of hundreds of thousands of homeowners' properties, according to the Bank of England, right? They say 300,000 homes, 1% of UK properties, risk having a fifth of the value wiped out because of dire climate scenarios.
I just thought this was utter nonsense.
What rubbish.
Absolute nonsense. All floodplains.
There's a reason that houses are getting flooded more, and it's nothing to do with the rain. It's everything to do with the drainage and everything to do with buildings being put on floodplains. That's what it's got to do with.
Yeah, but we've always had houses that are at risk and a real pain to sell on floodplains, and we've always had bad weather.
Yeah, but now we have more, though.
Yeah, we do. But this nonsense about climate change, I mean, there's been so many graphs and pie charts over the past few weeks showing that we've had temperatures like this going up and down for centuries now.
I know. And I mean, the idea that the Bank of England is suddenly getting involved in climate change policy, I find absolutely and utterly staggering. Meanwhile, in the Daily Mail, they've got a great story. They say council staff have been allowed to work from the beach more than 2,000 times since the pandemic. So basically, people are working from beaches in Ibiza and even as far away as Australia because they don't have to go into work.
Mike, I'm thinking about Michelle Keegan. I'm so sorry.
OK. Why did you call me Michelle, then, if you're thinking about Michelle Keegan?
Michelle, because you don't look like Michelle.
OK.
Can the mollycoddling of council staff and civil servants stop? Can this just absolutely stop? We've got higher council tax, and then we've got council staff working from the beach, working from Bali, working from, as you say, Australia.
Yeah.
How on earth, when they're in a different time zone, is it any wonder that we're not getting answers to our phone calls
this is that
they don't answer emails? Why should they care about local issues when they're on a beach? This is absolutely ridiculous. When did people stop understanding the difference between holiday, you go away, sit on a beach somewhere nice, and work?
Well, it was
when you sit in an office and do your work.
It was when they were given permission to go home and never come into the office again. That's where it started, and this was bound to happen. And the next thing that will happen is that people who are now employed overseas will be replaced by people from overseas on a lot less money.
And what Angela Rayner
we don't need you.
And what Angela Rayner and her ilk are doing is basically saying it's fine. You can have full-time pay for part-time work.
Yeah.
You can do exactly what you want. We'll bring in sort of French union-style laws.
Yeah.
And the economy is being wrecked by all this stuff.
Well, this is what the Labour government now want to do. We'll get on to them in a minute, but they want to have more rights for workers, don't they? Yeah. So that you can actually turn up for work even less than you do now.
Yes.
It's incredible.
And still get paid for it.
Yeah.
Still get paid full-time pay for part-time work.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
How are employers meant to cope with this?
Yeah.
How are they meant to cope with this? How are they meant to get their staff back in the offices? And how are they meant to cope with rises in national insurance, all of that stuff, all of the...
Oh, well, don't worry, if you're in the public, if you're in the public sector, you get all that covered. Town hall bosses approved at least 731 staff requests to work from abroad, with one council worker logging in from Ibiza for 4 years. Hello? Sorry?
Sorry,
what?
Can't hear you. Another pina colada,
can't
please.
Hear you. You know, there's a big disco going on in the background.
Exactly.
I mean, just incredible. Anyway, we'll come back with more, of course, about this failing Labour government and how useless they are. It's 6:15. I'm Mike Graham. More from me and Emma Wolf next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:18. Don't forget, you can send us a voice note. The number 0344 499 1000. Send it in on WhatsApp. Belinda has done just that.
Morning, Mike. It's Belinda. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. I hope you didn't eat too many mince pies. Anyway, I'm so glad you're back. I'm tuning in. Let's do it.
Belinda, thank you very much indeed. Good to hear from you. Peter in Suffolk says, morning, Mike. In Germany, there are often cases of people driving the wrong way up the motorway because the design of the slip roads makes it easy to get it wrong. Well, I mean, I must admit there are some confusing signs, but it's not a coincidence that you're telling me in Germany they drive the wrong way up the road. They're now doing it in London. Both cars that I saw doing it both had German plates. You know, I'm not picking on the Germans. It's just what I saw, anecdotal information. Now, it's really bad news that I got over the weekend, right? Alistair Campbell's among 50 victims after the collapse of his son's £5 million betting syndicate. A lot of people were very happy to see that.
Yes.
Apparently he's lost about 300,000 quid. And the police may or may not be called in.
My heart bleeds for him.
I know, shocking, isn't it?
Couldn't have happened to a nicer bloke.
I mean, gambling, please gamble responsibly.
Gamble aware, yes.
Please don't set up syndicates that don't work. I think that would be another warning. Let's talk about the Labour polling situation, because according to a poll done at the weekend by the Sunday Times, basically, Labour would lose 87 seats to the Conservatives, 67 to Reform, and 26 to the SNP if they had an election today.
It's a shocker.
Isn't
This
that
was
amazing?
a more in common poll, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it really was a mega collapse for Labour. In fact, complete collapse. Pretty much all their majority wiped out.
Yeah.
Pretty much pretty much reversal of all their gains in the Red Wall.
Yes. And they would lose a bunch of cabinet ministers as well, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. There were some good names in there. Can you remember any of them? Wes Streeting
Angela Rayner was
Angela
one.
Rayner was out. Wes Streeting, I think, was out.
You think he was, yeah.
I mean, big beasts. Unfortunately, not Keir Starmer.
No, absolutely.
I think he's in a very near.
Well, he's in a very, very safe seat.
He is.
But, I mean, they've had a pretty torrid week of it, the Labour Party, even though Keir Starmer's not been sort of really very much in evidence, and he's supposed to have been going on holiday, then he had his tragedy of his brother dying, you know, but he hasn't really been seen. I'm not sure if he's gone on holiday, nobody really knows.
No, I think he's lying low, but, I mean, we've had this ludicrous nonsense from Bridget Phillips, the Education Secretary. I mean, this is really pretty calamitous for Labour after 5 months. And I know all the kind of lefties are saying, oh, well, they're getting all the bad news out of the way early. No, I think this is probably Keir Starmer's last Christmas, first Christmas and last in number 10.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right.
What it's going to be a bloodbath in May, isn't it, with local elections?
I mean, he's desperately trying to cancel them, isn't he, with this new kind of plan
exactly.
to say, oh, no, we're going to rearrange the way that we do local voting.
But it also, I mean,
I don't think that's going to work.
Look, what is it? 3 million people, more than 3 million, have signed a petition asking for a general election. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the next 4 years before 2029 plays out.
Yeah.
Because they are already in real trouble.
Yeah, totally,
Not
absolutely.
5 years, 5 months.
And you know, we haven't even got on to the rearranging of the school curriculum, which is what Bridget Phillipson wants to do, and the VAT disaster, which is coming down the pipe from private schools. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
From Wednesday.
Yeah, but let's talk before that about the battle now that's raging between the Tory party and Reform, which is also getting a bit tasty.
This was this bizarre Boxing Day outburst. People are calling it, you know, had too many Bailey's kind of Badenoch thing.
Right.
Where she put, I mean, it was a series of about 6 or 7 tweets, completely, really untechnical, unfounded, where she attacked Reform for making up numbers. She was looking
their ticker wasn't accurate,
She was looking in the back end of their website, she was looking at their ticker and it was all wrong. And people were saying, well, look, you may be an engineer, you may have an engineering degree, but you know absolutely nothing. I was speaking to a cybersecurity expert who said there's no way she can go into their website and check their ticker. Check their membership numbers anyway.
I think I'm right in saying
Plus
that
they
now,
proved that they were genuine anyway.
And Elon Musk has now put a community note, I think, on Kemi Badenoch's tweet, saying actually there's no evidence to suggest that this is in any way a faked
fake news.
number. Yeah. So it's all a bit embarrassing.
She made a
really,
real fool of herself. Nigel Farage took her on and said, you know, they may even be considering legal action. I think they proved.
And then yesterday, the Mail on Sunday had a story saying that basically that she was trying to silence Nigel Farage on GB News, saying, you know, we mustn't allow him to have a show. Robert Jenrick's getting a show there.
And she was, of course, and she was saying that the GB News were giving him too much airtime. Well, no, she made the story. She created. And actually, all it's done, I think, is highlight how weak. And I'm Team Kemi. I like Kemi, but I think that how weak her performance has been. People are saying, you know what, she's not landing punches.
Well, you know, she did this with Starmer in the first couple of Prime Minister's questions, and she kind of picked the wrong subject. Like she started going after him on immigration, which of course you can do if you want, and say, well, Starmer's not doing anything about it, but not if you were in the Tory government for 14 years because you actually created it.
Yeah, and when you have hundreds of thousands of farmers demonstrating outside in Parliament Square, you said a few weeks ago, why would you not be talking about the farmers' inheritance tax when they're all outside? And instead, at PMQ, she went off on something completely random.
Yeah, or talk about, you know, the economy, because actually under the Tories, the economy was doing pretty well. We were the leading G7 country in terms of economic growth as recently as June. And then suddenly there's an election, and now it's all going horribly wrong. It's all going down the gurgler. And
Absolutely.
according to another poll, and this is in the I newspaper this morning, nearly 2/3 of voters do not believe Sir Keir Starmer can help relieve household spending pressures next year, despite his pledge to put more money in people's pockets. So basically, nobody believes a word he says.
Nobody believes a word he says. That mega poll proves that people don't want him in power, don't want Labour in power. And not only they won't ease the cost of living squeeze, they're making it much, much worse. They're adding cost to employment, to employers. They're adding cost to, you know, food prices. When the economy is this unstable, of course it's going to cost more. They've done nothing about fuel bills. They've done nothing about immigration.
I know.
The gangs. They're going to smash the gangs.
3 more people died yesterday trying to cross the channel.
And the numbers, we haven't got, I don't think we were covering this, but I mean, the numbers coming across the channel over the bad weather season, over Christmas, New Year, Boxing Day, whatever, they've been really, really high.
And now, apparently, we're going to spend another 15 million quid on some satellite technology to track the boats. Well, you can already track the boats. People do it on Twitter all the time.
You can see them. You can see them with your own eyes.
You can see them coming.
It's not very long, the channel. It's not that big. They're going to throw more money after bad. I don't know how much they're going to spend. Yet more money, 15 million on this sat-nav that's going to track the migrants.
So you can see them coming
from France.
And then you can't. Then you don't stop them anyway.
Well, you don't turn them around. What are you going to do then?
What's the point?
You just see them.
See
them chucking their phones in the water.
It's like watching, you know, planes flying round and round and round over Heathrow.
Or you could track Father Christmas on Christmas Day night, couldn't you?
You can do that.
You can track him as well.
You can,
well,
maybe
that would be a good...
NASA could do it for them. Absolutely unbelievable. Let's talk about the plan to diversify the school curriculum. This is on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. As you might not be surprised to know, Bridget Phillipson, yet another former Marxist, basically wants to decolonise the curriculum, and they want to make it more diverse, to breathe new life into it, because apparently it's outdated.
Bring back Michael Gove on the curriculum. They think it's too monocultural.
What does that even mean? What does that even mean?
They basically mean it's too white. So there's going to be more kind of wokey interference in our curriculum. This is whitewashing, this is erasing, rewriting history.
And guess who they're listening to, They're listening to the teaching unions, Here's the National Association of Head Teachers. They've said that the diversity of our society should be reflected in the school curriculum, which means that the members saw the benefits of using diverse reading materials for subverting racial biases.
Can I
Especially when teaching to a majority white classroom. Why?
Well, they're not majority white classrooms, many of them. Can I explain something to you? As someone who's just entered the state system with a 4-year-old, they spent a month on Black History Month. They spent weeks on Gay Pride. There was a lot, and I'm not criticising any specific groups, but we are in Britain, right? They spend more time on diversity and multiculturalism and, gender neutrality and all of that stuff that they are stuffing into our, and I say this with anger, they're stuffing into our children's brains than they do on the basics, which is numeracy and literacy and the urgent problem of getting children back into classrooms, because the absentee rate of children is a major problem. This makes me so
apparently parents aren't sending their kids to schools. I was told just before the show started that in Wales they've now banned Of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck's novel.
These are classics.
Because they don't like the language that's used in it. I mean, come on.
What you need to do is teach children this was of its time. We don't use racist language like this anymore. It's just so... And I know
it's called history.
I know a lot of... Yes, it's called history, but history doesn't exist because we're going to pull down all the statues and pretend it never happened.
Henry VIII used to behead his wives. It doesn't mean that was a good thing, but you can't pretend it didn't happen.
But it's all part and parcel of, paying reparations and pulling down statues and all of that. It's a really, really dangerous thing that we are introducing here. And you know what, Mike? More and more people, more and more parents that I know are doing homeschooling because they cannot cope with this absolute destruction of our curriculum.
It is incredible.
And this all feeds into the thing where young people then don't start work and they do just sit at home. They can't
Speaking of reparations, apparently it's now been revealed, again in the Sunday Times, just came out over the weekend, that the conversations that are going on between the Labour government and Mauritius about the Chagos Islands involve us supposedly being asked to pay £800 million a year for the right to use the airbase.
Couldn't make this up.
I mean, literally.
They've opened this hornet's nest, and we're now being literally strapped over a barrel by Chagos, asking for billions of pounds and to return them. I mean, what has Keir Starmer done here? David Lammy.
Well, but either or, take your pick. This from Bex, who says this. Margaret in Tunisia, I should say. I'm retired, she says. Employers should give their staff an ultimatum. Either they go back into the office or they'll replace them with people that will. I'm sick and tired of all this mollycoddling and mental health being used as an excuse all the time.
Exactly, and that's ridiculous. What we're saying. It is absolutely ridiculous. Work is work and holiday is holiday.
Yeah.
Working on the beach is not working.
No.
You know, checking your phone on the beach, that's your choice if you want to do that, but that's not work.
It's not.
You can't work from abroad.
No.
Especially when these local councils, I mean, what... It's just complete nonsense.
It is.
Absolutely
nonsense. Ridiculous. Totally and utterly ridiculous. We've got lots more to do. We're going to talk about Liam Payne as a development in that story over in Argentina. We're also going to talk as well a bit more about the Home Office and migrants and what they're spending. Also criminals apparently now not only trying to get out of prison, they're trying to get back into it. They want to go and work in prison because it's so lucrative, because of all the drugs that are sold there. Incredible stuff. We'll be back after this with Amy Tarkanian, who's going to tell us all about the life and times of President Jimmy Carter.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:32. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, 4 glorious hours, or 3.5 now, of Morning Glory. Emma Wolf is here. Bill in Cheshire says, on education diversity, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but did the last census show that over 80% of our population is white? Why does our entire history have to be skewed towards minorities? It's bizarre. Well, it doesn't. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, why can't you teach all of it? That's the point. Emma's just saying that, you know, there is this unnecessary bias towards whatever it is that they think we haven't been doing in order to now do it instead of something that we should be doing. Doesn't make any sense. Let's talk to Amy Tarkanian, a Republican strategist, because over the course of the last few hours of last evening, former US President Jimmy Carter died at the age of 100. And he was, I suppose what you might say, a fascinating character. He came in after Watergate. He came in after Richard Nixon had resigned, saying he wasn't a crook, but wasn't impeached. He came in after Gerald Ford. He came in before Ronald Reagan and kind of lost the plot, really, didn't he, Amy? Very good morning to you. In the deserts of the Middle East, when that terrible, you know, attempted rescue of the hostages in Iran went so wrong.
Correct, and he actually came in at a good time, because you had the majority of the voting citizens feeling very uneasy about our government because of Watergate. Right. And then you had Gerald Ford appointed after that happened. And so when the election took place, he won very, very handily. And so he did struggle, though, as you just mentioned. The Iranian hostages, there were 52 American ambassadors that he was never, ever able to bring home. And that caused him heartache. That really hurt him, I think, in the end, in not getting reelected and allowing Ronald Reagan to come in as a new, fresh voice of hope. So, you know, he only served one term. He also, though, unfortunately, came in at a time because of the Iranian situation. There was an energy crisis, which led to gas lines. You know, you had people lining up for miles trying to fill up their cars with gas. There was extremely high inflation. He was never able to grasp to get the economy on track. And so, you know, those things combined were enough for people to say, we're done with you.
Yes.
And so then you had Ronald Reagan come in.
And I wonder as well, because I remember when those the helicopters crashed in the desert, and it was a kind of, I was with some Americans, funnily enough, at the time. I was at university, and it seemed as though it was the first time since Vietnam, really, that the American sort of military strength had been questioned. Because up until then, everyone thought, oh, well, we can just go and rescue them, and then suddenly they couldn't.
Right. And so, you know, he attempted to bring them home, and once again he wasn't able to come back with any success, and the Iranians actually ended up releasing them on the last day of his term. And so that was their way of saying, we're in control, you're not, get the heck out.
Yeah, exactly right. And he's been spoken about, hasn't he, since his death, as a kind of, you know, a very peaceful man, a very decent man. I mean, Joe Biden sort of went out of his way, rather, it seems, when he was on his holidays down in the Virgin Islands to say, oh, well, you know, he was such a nice man. Imagine he would never say the kind of things that Donald Trump says. I mean, he didn't quite say it in that way, but that's kind of what he meant, wasn't it?
Sure. And I think, once again, it was because... you know, you have somebody who was actually, he was in the Naval Academy, and then he went to go and help his family run a peanut farm because they needed assistance. And then he ended up serving in the Senate, and he was the governor of Georgia. And so, you know, he was a pretty simple man. He was a pretty likable person, from what I understand. I never got to meet him, but I have met his wife, Rosalind, and I met their son, Jack. And they were lovely individuals. And he was married to his wife for 77 years.
Yes. Although he famously said,
to be said.
That's the other thing I remember him saying, though, was he was once asked about whether he was faithful to his wife, and he confessed that he had lust in his heart. Remember that?
No, I don't.
No, that was what he said. It was one of those. He was very, very pure and very Christian, but he was like, no, I definitely have lust in my heart. But there we are. I've got to ask you, Amy, a few days away now from the Donald Trump presidency, Joe Biden's decided to spend the last few days of running the free world on a beach.
Yeah, well, I think I read somewhere that they figured it was at least 40% of his time in office that he's spent on vacation.
Right.
And it's, you know, it's disappointing. Despite party, you want to see your president succeed. You know, you're not going to agree with them 100%, but he just seems to have, you know, walked away.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump has already gotten to work.
Right.
I mean, he's already been making negotiations. He's already been making threats. He's already been making massive changes, and he's moving quickly on his nomination, you know, appointments for cabinet positions.
Right.
So he's not even waiting until Inauguration Day. So I think Joe Biden's pretty much checked out.
Yeah, it would seem so. One final one for you, Amy. What about the story we were just talking about and the rearranging of the British school curriculum, or certainly the England and Wales school curriculum, the Welsh doing away with mice and men as a text for secondary school kids to actually learn from. That's a pretty extraordinary move, isn't it?
It is, and you actually used a word, mollycockly, and so I wanted to say that so badly. I've never heard that term before, and no, it's unfortunate, and that's something that I think is really damning, because, like you mentioned, these books were meant to tell a time about, what was going on during then. It's not meant to be perfection. It's not meant to,
it's not an instruction manual,
make everyone feel good about themselves.
Right. Exactly right. Listen, Amy, I'm sure we'll be talking again soon once the Donald takes over at the White House. Thank you very much indeed, Amy Tarkanian there, Republican strategist. Interesting, isn't it, what Donald Trump's doing and how that's all moving along, and how Biden has, as she just said, sort of checked out.
Yeah.
40% of his time as president on holiday.
That is shocking.
Isn't it?
I didn't realise it was that high. No, I mean, Donald Trump, pretty much from day one, there was a vacuum, wasn't there? There was an absolute vacuum. Pretty much from day one, he looked like the president.
Yeah.
I mean, straight after the election in November. And also...
and then he went to Notre Dame.
He was at Notre Dame. Do you remember? He was with Prince William. He was with... Not with Keir Starmer, he was with...
No, Starmer didn't turn up. That was one of his big misses. He was in Saudi Arabia trying to sell crazy Ed Miliband's wind farm idea to the Saudis.
Instead of which...
What a plank.
Prince William got photos of the Trump, with the Trump, looking, he was looking very regal as well.
Looking very much at ease,
Yeah, and Keir Starmer was absolutely not there. And so, Trump was right in there. He's been on the world stage. He's been taken much more seriously than Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, who really is sleepy, vacationing Joe.
I suppose we should mention, because it is on all the front pages, which we haven't mentioned yet, this terrible plane crash in Korea, South Korea, which apparently is the worst, deadliest plane crash for 5 years. 179 people killed. They're saying they're not sure, but they're suggesting that it may well have been hit by a bird strike, the plane, as it was coming in, had to make an emergency landing. But then as it sort of staggered and slid across the runway, it hit a wall, which people are saying there shouldn't be a wall at the end of a runway.
No, and these appalling scenes. There's something about the photos. I've been looking at the photos of the families in the terminal just waiting to hear about their loved ones. I think only two crew members were rescued from the sort of blaze of the wreckage. But there's a kind of quiet dignity, isn't there, in these people just waiting for news and grieving in the airport terminal there.
Yeah, just
terrible
horrific
thing to happen at Christmas.
Really awful. We've got lots more to do, lots more to talk about, including, of course, criminals trying to get back into prison, plus the Liam Payne story from Argentina, and we'll pick up on one or two other stories in the papers as well. Bad weather coming over the course of the next few days, apparently, so that we're going to all have trouble travelling about. Well, we will have trouble travelling about because there was fog yesterday, which delayed an awful lot of planes taking off. We've also got rail strikes coming tomorrow on the Avanti line. So if you're trying to get to Manchester or Glasgow up the West Coast line, good luck, is all I can say. This is Talk.
Tell me about the monkey.
The monkey is, he said in previous interviews that he felt like he was a performing monkey, especially on the early days. Nigel Martin Smith putting Take That together. It also has more of an explanation when you watch the movie. He's always had this kind of fear of people in the audience hating him. And I suppose it's like the imposter syndrome thing of seeing people in the audience going, you're not talented, you shouldn't be doing this. And he's always kind of pictured that person as an ape in the audience.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:45. I'm Mike Graham. Emma Wolf is here with me. A couple of stories to mention on Starmer still. One that came up over the weekend. Apparently Lady Starmer, Lady Victoria Starmer, who some people rather erroneously referred to as the First Lady, is apparently appearing on the front page, or the front cover of Tatler, the posh people's magazine. But they've used a picture in which she was walking into an event on a red carpet with her husband, who happens to be the Prime Minister. He's been airbrushed out of it. If we can see the actual original picture as well, you can see that not only have they airbrushed him out of it, but they haven't done it very well, because her right arm appears to be completely and utterly missing.
The original photo shows the two of them walking into this event together.
Right.
And the front cover of Tatler, so she didn't pose for it, the front cover of Tatler, they're using this photo of her looking, you know, glamorous with a red lip.
Yeah.
And they've just got rid of the Prime Minister. He's that insignificant and unimportant or undesirable.
I mean, I put it out over the weekend and got loads and loads of interest in it. People were saying, I wish we could just airbrush him out of Downing Street so that he wouldn't actually be there when we come back from the Christmas and New Year holiday. It's amazing.
A similar kind of fashion plate was Samantha Cameron, and she had her own fashion line and all of that.
Right.
But she would be regularly pictured with the Prime Minister on her arm, showing off her fashion, kind of, you know, her beautiful dresses and things.
Exactly.
But they didn't airbrush Cameron out of it.
No.
It does come to something when you see how unwanted.
Tatler obviously not interested in him at all.
Well, no, but he would have damaged.
It's a bit of a champagne socialist magazine to be in, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Tatler is, you know, very much the posh people's magazine.
Absolutely.
You don't have copies of it lying around, you know, Communist Party HQ normally, do you?
You don't.
Unbelievable. Let's have a word about what's on the front page of the Express. Beware risks of weight loss drugs bought online. You wouldn't think that would be a story, but apparently in this day and age, people are so stupid that they're buying unregulated weight loss drugs from people they don't know on the internet.
It's a huge, huge problem.
How ridiculous is that?
So doctors, in their wisdom, have decided, huge amounts of people, you know, the health sector included, have decided the NHS is going to make hundreds of thousands of people eligible for these weight loss jabs, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Ozempic, all of these.
Yeah.
And yet the NHS can't cope with demand, and they're not supplying them. So, I mean, a really, really large majority of people are buying them online without any kind of medical supervision, without any guarantee.
And they don't really know what they're buying.
They don't know what they're buying. There's no quality control. There's no safety guarantee. There's no monitoring or checks.
And presumably not cheap either.
No, they're not cheap. People are ending up in comas. People are actually going to lose their lives over this. It's totally unsafe. And that is without going into the whole mental health issue of young women buying them, very, very underweight young women buying them, and basically dying. This is such a massive problem.
And this is now, because it's such a big business, it's actually being run by criminals who are going to great lengths to make their online store look authentic. I always say this to people. They go, oh, but the thing is, you know, I didn't realise it was a scam because it looked so real. And you go, well, why do you think they'd scam you? They don't make it look like a scam, otherwise it wouldn't work.
Of course.
They make it look like it's an authentic place to buy whatever it is you think you're buying. You know, if you think you're buying an official, you know, marketed brand of something, but you haven't checked, you know, just don't buy it.
But you cannot blame people for this. They're desperate, they're worried, they're anxious, they want to lose weight. They're being told these jabs will make you magically lose weight. No, of course they should.
Without trying to magically lose weight.
No, look, I'm very critical of these drugs, but I'm saying people are being told, miracle weight loss jab, inject this into you, totally unregulated, and you'll lose weight. So they're buying this stuff, and they're going to get really sick. There's going to be, there's going to be problems here.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good story in the Mail. They're calling it exclusive. Criminals try to get back into prison, right? We know that this government likes letting people out of prison quite a lot. These are people from organised crime groups who actually want to get back into prison to work inside the prisons because they're so lucrative for distributing drugs. I mean, incredible, isn't it?
What's happened to our prisons? What's happened? Why are mobile phones and drugs and criminal gangs rife in our prisons?
People smoke in prison. You can smoke ganja. You can smoke spice.
You can get drugs. You can have quite a cushy lifestyle. You can watch telly.
People are having sex in them as well.
The guards are having sex with prisoners. I mean, this is an absolute joke.
Incredible. These are people who are applying for official jobs. 1 in 7 job applications for HM Prison and Probation Service were rejected after vetting checks last year.
What, found they were actually ex-cons?
Because they found they were actually ex-cons who wanted to try and get into the system.
Worse than a Timpson's key shop, isn't it?
I know. Absolutely incredible. Latest figures show that a record 193 prison staff were dismissed for misconduct in the 12 months to September.
And meanwhile, they're letting out the really dangerous people to go and abuse their partners and, that run rife on our streets.
Absolutely extraordinary stuff.
Who is the prisons minister? Who is in charge at the moment of...
I've no idea.
Is it Shabana Mahmood?
Oh, Shamima Begum, she's the justice minister.
She's justice. She must be to do with this. I mean, who's behind all this?
Yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, they've lost control of the prisons a long time ago, to be fair. Yeah. But they haven't really got them back because nobody who's in government ever wants to build any new ones. No, and that is the problem. Let's talk a bit about Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died back in a couple of months ago in Argentina. Apparently there are now 5 people who have been charged in connection with his death. According to 2 of them have been remanded in custody. One of those charged is his friend Roger Norres, who said that he left the singer at the hotel about an hour before he fell to his death. Apparently he's been charged with negligent homicide. A waiter who admitted to using drugs, including cocaine, with him has also been charged with supplying drugs. And several other people as well have been charged along with that as well. Terribly tragic story.
Really sad, isn't it? And it does seem to be a lot of drugs involved. I mean, from, unconfirmed reports, it seems that a lot of people were sort of helping, aiding and abetting. Of course, he was clearly, from photos and footage and things, clearly in a terrible state in those in that day leading up to this kind of terrible tragedy.
Just awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Morning, Mike says, Chris, I used to work for a fire service in the north of England. With regard to mental health, their strapline was, it's OK not to be OK. Well, guess what? Suddenly people were not OK by the dozens. Who could have imagined it? Well, that's the thing. If you say to people, look, if you don't really feel like coming to work, just don't. What do you think they're going to do?
But this is what I mean about this kind of softening of our culture. You know, you do need to also tell people, once in a while you have a really bad day.
Yeah.
Bad days and good days are normal.
Right.
Once in a while you get dumped by your girlfriend and you're going to feel rubbish for a month or two.
Yeah.
You've still got to pull your bootstraps up and get into work.
Well, also, it's better for you. I mean, we talk to psychologists.
Because it's a distraction.
Yeah, but also we talk to psychologists all the time on this show and on other shows on this station. And the worst thing you can do if you're feeling...
is wallow.
Depressed is wallow and sit there and not talk to anybody and not go out.
If I don't work, I would be deeply depressed. Like, if I wasn't working, I would be depressed.
Yeah.
Even when you have time off, you sort of start to feel a bit aimless and a bit kind of existential about life. Right. What's the point of it all?
Yeah, what day is it?
What day is it?
I mean, for last
it is
week,
weird that it's Monday today because everything is so closed and everything is so kind of shut down. But every proof has shown that work is good for you.
Absolutely right.
Physically good for you as well. Mentally good for you.
As well as
good for the economy. Good for your family life. Good for your relationships.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, one of the things you might not know, because you might not have seen it, but you can go and watch it now, or after this show is over, is Plank of the Year. Yeah, we do Plank of the Week every week, but we've done Plank of the Year. Here's a little clip from it. We have had strike after strike after strike. Yeah. Junior doctors have been on strike. The consultant doctors have been on strike.
And look at the pay rise.
And these are guys that are driving around in mostly Maseratis, Lamborghinis.
The good consultants have not been on strike. We have brilliant doctors. I know
we do have brilliant doctors, James. I know that, but we also have something called the BMA, the British Medical Association, which is
Can I just jump in with both of you and say, I mean, listen, mate, you know what I think of you, and of course you have that. What I think the real issue about the NHS is, not your opinion, just hear me out, is it's so revered. We need to knock it off its bloody pedestal.
Very true. Well said, Jeremy Carl. How about this from Nick, who says, welcome back, Mike. We missed you. Bridget Phillipson is symptomatic of all that is wrong with the Labour front bench. Since leaving Oxford University, she has never had a proper job outside of politics. Never. No. And this is a big problem, isn't it, for the so-called, cabinet that we have, because none of them have got any experience of any kind of industry or any kind of, sort of entrepreneurial situation.
Exactly. And then you have Rachel Reeves, who, worked in customer service and claiming to be a top economist at the Bank of England and other top banks.
Look how well that's going.
Absolute nonsense.
I mean, absolutely incredible stuff. Let's go back once again to the migrant situation. The Home Office, as we said earlier, spent £15 million on some new satellite equipment, which apparently is going to track them so that we know what's going on. But also 3 more dead in the Channel, a story on page 8 of the Mail yesterday. Yet more people coming. More people came on Christmas Day, I think, than any other day of December so far.
And it's
just extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think migrant crossings, I think it's 150,000 since 2018. We've got a real problem, and all we've heard, in fact, he's gone a bit quiet, but Keir Starmer's just keep on repeating this mantra about smashing the gangs.
Yeah.
And do you remember he held a press conference to say that he'd found
they'd arrested some Kurdish guy. Kurdish guy
who did the valves in the dinghies or something, and that was going to be the key to it all.
Yes.
Well, what's happened there?
Yeah.
I mean, how is that smashing the gangs?
Well, he hasn't smashed the gangs,
People can see them coming over. We don't need sat-nav. We can see them. We could probably use my 4-year-old's binoculars, little thingies to just look out of the, look across the channel.
Yeah, look
and see
over
them.
there.
I can see them. They're getting in boats, presumably in France, and they're coming over.
Yeah.
What is the plan?
I know.
Where are they coming from?
There isn't one.
Stop them earlier.
Right.
Don't let them get in their boats. Turn the boats back. Any of those options might work.
Yeah.
I don't see that £15 million. This is good money thrown after bad.
Tracking them by satellite.
And then when they arrive here, did you see that story in the Sunday papers yesterday about the Albanian smugglers who are advertising package deals? You come to this country, it's $2,500.
Right.
You get your fake passport, you get your accommodation, you get your travel over on a boat.
Yeah.
And when you arrive,
free moped.
When you arrive, you also get a cash-in-hand job on the black market.
Yeah.
It is absolutely appalling. This stuff is being advertised on social media. All the government need to do, forget the sat-nav, they need to start following up these things and saying, oh, hi.
Just go after the people putting the adverts out. It's not difficult, is it? Finally, Elon Musk, who's been making him quite a lot of hay while the sun's been shining over the course of the last few days and weeks. He's been having rows with all sorts of people, including some of the Make America Great Again people over in the States. But he's now said that very few businesses want to invest in Sir Keir Starmer's Britain. He's basically saying that Britain is now putting off wealth creators and nobody wants to come here and put any money into the country, which is what Starmer supposedly is all about.
It's what he's all about. It's not only that wealth creators don't want to come here and invest in our country, it's also that people like Charlie Mullins, Pimlico Plumbers guy, people, billionaires, are leaving this country because it's so unattractive to try and run businesses.
Yeah.
And whatever you think about Elon Musk and his interference, and I'm uncomfortable with his interference in our in UK politics.
Nobody seemed to mind when Bill Gates was interfering, though,
No,
did they?
I know, but I think that anyway, it's not his business, but anyway. But he is actually a billionaire. He is actually a potential investor.
Yeah.
And what he thinks and what he says about investment and business, it does actually matter. And of course the Labour government will ignore what he says. But what he's saying...
investment summit and they didn't bother inviting him.
Didn't bother inviting the guy who actually runs... I mean, Scotland, I think, want Tesla to invest in Scotland.
Yeah, right. Well, he's the richest man in the world. He seems to know an awful lot about how to make successful companies work successfully.
Exactly, and we could do with some of that in Britain. Right. He's very, very close to the next leader of the free world.
But we've now got Sir Keir Starmer going around asking regulatory bodies what we can do to boost the economy. So he's going to go to Ofcom and say, what do you think we should do about broadcasting? Or he's going to go to Ofwat and say, how do you think we can improve the water companies?
Absolutely ridiculous.
What are they going to tell him that's going to be of any use to man or beast?
They're the regulators. Look at how Ofwat have failed and failed and failed on sewage and floods and all of that, drainage in this country.
It's incredible.
An absolute joke. Meanwhile, Musk, who could actually invest in our country and could actually advise really helpfully the government and businesses, is being told, well, we don't like you, get out.
No, you're the wrong kind of investor. Absolutely incredible stuff. Ridiculous, really, isn't it? And then, meanwhile, on the Shamima Begum front, a little update on that. According to her lawyer, her hopes of returning have been bolstered since the fall of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. We were actually hoping to speak to Alan Duncan, who's out there in Syria at some point this week. But around 100 extremists could return to Britain, it says, if jihadi bride Shamima Begum is allowed back from Syria. I don't think the government's got any real sort of thirst to bring her back, do you? Hopefully not.
I wouldn't be surprised. What this Labour government have done thus far, I would not be surprised if they let all of these people back.
Yeah. I mean, we've already read a few hundred of them back, but she's kind of the poster girl for it all, isn't she?
She is, and it would really take the biscuit if they let her back. But, I mean, honestly, nothing would surprise me now from Keir Starmer.
No, nothing
Giving
would
away,
surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me if he gave away, you know, I don't know, the
Falklands. The Gibraltar.
Well, yeah, he's going to do that.
The Isle of Wight. The Isle of Sheppey. I mean, there's a whole list. He could do it. Anyway, listen, Emma, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. How about this from Jenny in London? A number of companies in the UK only allow employees to work abroad for a maximum of 2 weeks a year, provided they hold a passport from that country. This is due to tax implications. Working abroad indefinitely is not permitted. That's a very good point, actually. The taxman might want to know. And Mark in Selby says, Mike, the French government should be accused of allowing deaths to occur in the Channel of illegal immigrants attempting to cross it to get into the UK. If the French allowed us to take back the boats, the problem would disappear in a week. Simple. Well, it would. Absolutely right. Coming up, we got Theo Usherwood. He's going to join us to bring us what the latest is from the world of politics, and it's not any less crazy than it was before. We'll see you after the news right here on Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oifamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. Glorious 4 hours of Morning Glory. Alex Phillips will be here at 10 to take you through what happens after that, because we are, ladies and gentlemen, in the penultimate day of the year, right? It is the 30th of December. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, and who knows what 2025 will bring. According to the polls this morning that we're reading from over the weekend, if there was an election today, Labour would basically lose their majority. Reform would have about 70-odd MPs. The Tories would recover some of the losses that they had back in July, and Labour would be holed below the waterline. No Yvette Cooper, no Angela Rayner, no Wes Streeting. A whole bunch of basically cabinet members would lose their seats because Labour are, as we knew before I went away on holiday before Christmas, about as unpopular as, well, I'm not going to say it, but you know what I mean. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, here's what you do.
Morning, Mike. Great show as ever. James from Blackburn.
Morning, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire.
Hi, Mike. Pete from Bath here. Great show as always.
Mike Graham, I love you. You know what? They need to give you another shift because I can't get enough.
Actually, I ran into some people at the weekend who were like, can you not just work all the way through till 1? Now, I don't know what start interfering with Julie Hartley-Brewer. That would be wrong, obviously. She'll be back soon, by the way. Mega poll shows Labour would lose nearly 200 seats. Council staff, according to the Daily Mail this morning, are being allowed to work from the beach, which seems ridiculous. The Times says that more and more young people, particularly women, are not going to work at all. More of them are off work because they're anxious and because they're not well, rather than actually looking after families. Incredible stuff. 0344 499 1000. Also, Keir Starmer's been airbrushed out of a picture with his wife so that she can appear on the cover of Tatler magazine. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Theo Usherwood is here. We'll take more of your calls. We'll take more of your texts and tweets, of course, as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Five minutes past 7. A very good morning to you. Let's say a very good morning as well to Theo Usherwood. Theo, very good morning to you.
Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy time, it's family time, it's, you know, but sometimes you just need to get away. That's what I decided. I was like, right, I've had enough of that. I'm going to come back and do some work for a while.
I had an editor who always used to work on Boxing Day. He didn't have to do it when I started out. And the only reason is he wanted to get away from his in-laws. He couldn't stand it. So as soon as he had the opportunity, he straight back to the office.
Yes. Fortunately, I've managed to sort of refine my socialising with members of my family so that it doesn't really involve any in-laws at all, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
Let's talk, though, about how bad things are for Labour, because this poll at the weekend in the Sunday Times, quite extraordinary stuff, really. I mean, we knew they were pretty unpopular. We knew that his approval rating, Keir Starmer's approval rating, was down through the floor. But, I mean, this is really quite serious, isn't it, to suggest that if there was an election tomorrow, which is, 6 months after they won a landslide victory, they'd lose nearly 200 seats.
Yes, and this is a significant poll, and it will cause a huge amount of agitation, I'd imagine, amongst Labour MPs who don't want to, when they signed up to become an MP, didn't sign up to become an MP for 5 years. And I imagine that if this trend continues, they will be starting to ask questions about Keir Starmer's leadership. Now, the mechanism to get rid of a Labour leader is much more difficult than it is to get rid of a Conservative leader. But the point remains, Mike, that this trend needs to be stopped. It needs to be stopped quickly from Labour's point of view, and it needs to be stopped for the local elections in May. If there's a glimmer of hope for Labour, and it is this, if you look at this poll, if you add together the number of Labour MPs, you add together the number of SNP and the Liberal Democrats, then that is enough to form what would be called a rainbow coalition, and keep Labour, and as Labour being the largest party, they would remain, Keir Starmer or another would remain as Prime Minister, but that is all predicated on the fact that Reform and the Conservatives can't find a way around their current impasse when it comes to doing a deal. Now, if they can get their act together and do a deal, then at some point over the next 4 years, then it would look, and the current trends continue, then it would look to be curtain for this Labour government.
Yeah, but that is the problem, isn't it? Because you've got ever more kind of unpopularity coming their way, and with every move that they seem to make, they become even more unpopular. It's not as if there's any kind of change in the temperature. I mean, I was driving around the M25 yesterday, taking my daughter to Gatwick Airport, and you pass quite a lot of overhead bridges, farm vehicles parked on them saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. There's a lot of, what you might call base level, kind of street level anger out there, and that's just from the farmers. We also know clearly that we're going to have a big schools backlash coming up because this ridiculous notion of getting 6,500 teachers out of the VAT raid, which is going to cause massive problems in the state school sector because of overcrowding and all of that. You know, it's just not going to get any better, is it? We've got NHS strikes, I think, coming over the course of the new year. We've got rail strikes coming up starting tomorrow, running all the way through to May. I mean, there's nothing good on the horizon, is there?
No, I think you're quite right to point that out. And the other thing I'd say, Mike, is that, and I know there's a huge amount, I'm sure you've been following the news like I have over the Christmas break, but there's been a huge amount said about the fact that, there's this row between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage, and the Reform membership now surging past 150,000, and Kemi Badenoch accusing the Reform ticker membership being a fake. But the truth is this: where Reform is gaining, it is predominantly in Labour seats. They came out of 98 seats where they came second in the general election. In 89 of those, they were Labour seats. So actually, when you look at Nigel Farage's surge that we've seen in terms of membership, in terms of his popularity, Reform now has a better net favourability rating than Labour. Nigel Farage now has a better net favourability rating than Keir Starmer. It is Reform's surge at the same time as all of those problems that you've just listed, which is going to continue in its current path, and there is nothing that Labour seems to be able to do to stop that decline. So actually, it is the surge of Reform UK and Nigel Farage that is going to sting Labour. It's going to hurt Labour the most, and it doesn't seem. And as you say, there's no apparent hope. There's no salvation looking into 2025, and of course events can take over, but there is no salvation at the moment for Keir Starmer in anything that he might be announcing or might happen that will arrest that decline in his popularity.
Right. And what about the May elections? Because there was talk, wasn't there, just before Christmas of, a kind of a realignment of local sort of areas and making sure that district councils are done away with and sort of regions were somehow put together, which might prevent some elections from taking place. Has that now been forgotten about, or is that still happening?
Well, it could still happen. I mean, it's got to be ironed out, but Labour would be incredibly stupid to do anything that would feed into this narrative that they're trying to stitch it up to protect themselves.
Yes.
I mean, because ultimately there's going to have to be an election at some local election at some point. And yes, they want to streamline councils, but to go ahead in May in order to avoid what will be a very painful moment. Reform predicted to win around 400 seats in those local elections as things currently stand. To try and gerrymander it or change the rules or defer those votes as part of a widespread reform of local government, when actually the accusation will come back pretty quickly and will like a boomerang and hit Keir Starmer in the face, because it will be, well, you're just changing the rules because you're scared of us, and ultimately there's going to have to be a vote at some point. And I would think that any pain that they might experience in May if they tried to delay it would be much more painful further down the line.
Right. And what do you make of this Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Kemi Badenoch didn't need to do it. She didn't need to raise the problem. She didn't need to raise the issue that many, many more people who used to vote Conservative are now going to vote Reform. Why did she do it? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And, when you speak to Reform people, and I've spoken to a few over Christmas, when you speak to Reform people, they're like, thank you, Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah.
You've done us a huge favour. Story was going away. Yes, we had our surge in numbers. Yes, we'd overtaken you. And just with your tweet on Boxing Day, you just gave us another week of coverage. Thank you so much. And when you speak to Conservatives, they're like, what were you doing?
Yeah.
What on earth were you thinking? Because if you're going to do, let's say for the sake of argument, like there is some merit, and actually the independent analysis is that there isn't any merit to causing this live ticker a fake, as Kemi Badenoch has done. If you're going to do that, get one of your outriders, get somebody to start asking a few journalists who are sympathetic to your cause to ask questions. Don't go on X on Boxing Day and start tweeting.
Right.
I mean, that was just like it made absolutely no sense.
No.
And it was, of course,
particularly
exactly
on a day
what Nigel Farage wanted.
and not only that, but on a day when there's not very much news around. So, I mean, even if you're going to do it on a day when, you know, it's not going to make front-page news. And you just go, who's advising her? You know, I've already seen a couple of tweets saying, you know, in the new year, Reform are going to make the offer to Kemi Badenoch to become their full-time marketing manager because she's done such a great job over the Christmas holidays, you know.
Well, it's funny you said it. It was a wise owl pointed out to me, who knows about these things. Interestingly, this was something that was done on Kemi Badenoch's Twitter of X on Boxing Day without the supervision of those around her.
Right.
And actually she just decided to, you know, the accusation, you know, she did just go for it without actually taking the advice. She's got, to be fair to her, she's got a couple of clever people working for her who know what they're doing. They've been around in Westminster for quite a long period of time. And I struggle to see any way in which they would have advised her to go down this particular route. They would know it's madness, and it turned out to be.
Right. And in another sort of blow to Starmer, there's a piece on the front page of the I newspaper this morning from Survation, another poll which is conducted for 38 Degrees, basically saying 62% of people think the government will not tackle the cost of living in 2025. Nearly two-thirds of voters basically don't believe a word he says, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and the cost of living is the most important one. Of everything that Keir Starmer wants to do over the next 3.5, 4 years in order to prepare for the next election, the most important one for him is that people feel better off as a result of having voted Labour in July. And if people don't believe in the first instance that they are going to be better off, then when you actually tell them that they're going to be better off, or they should be better off, well, you say, oh, look at this set of numbers that's just come out.
What he keeps saying, though.
They say you're better off, but they're not going to believe you, and that's the real problem. And the other thing is that keep on breaking your promises, you build up this sense that you can't be trusted. So if you go and stand next to waspy women and say, we back your campaign, and it turns out that you have the opportunity to stump up the cash, which would prove that to be true, and you don't, then people are going to stop believing you. If you say there will be no tax rises, and you go and put up taxes by £40 billion, including £25 billion of national insurance, and removing the exemptions for farmers, then people are not going to believe you. Trust in politics is hard-earned and easily lost.
It really is. And the problem is he keeps repeating it. Whenever he is in front of a camera, he talks about, you know, well, we had to make the tough choices because we had to, you know, bring back prosperity to people and make them feel better off. Well, nobody feels better off. We had to cut back on the waiting list, you know. Well, the waiting lists are getting longer. You know, nothing's actually working. So you can't just keep standing there telling us that it's all rosy in the garden when the garden's basically burning down.
Yeah, and the problem they've got is that there is no way to arrest the decline. And the other thing, just on the terms of, you know, the public services, if we see further strike action, and there is every likelihood that we will see further strike action this year coming, 2025, the public are going to be furious. They're going to be so angry because we had £10 billion of public sector pay rises that might actually go up back in the summer. We're now having to pay for that, of course, with higher taxes. And if the trade unions then turn around and start strike action, which means that actually the trains still don't run on time, you still have to wait.
Well, you don't have to wait long. You don't have to wait till next year, Theo, because tomorrow, starting on New Year's Eve, Avanti, the RMT in Avanti are going on strike. So if you're going to try and travel on what is one of the busiest days of the year to travel up on the West Coast main line, you're going to struggle. And they're going to also apparently strike several days over Christmas. I think they're striking on the 2nd of January, the 3rd of January. They're talking about striking all the way through the summer till May, and through the spring, rather, every single Sunday.
Yes, and the problem for Keir Starmer's got, and when he decided to get rid of Louise Hay, the Transport Secretary, was she was very sympathetic to the union's cause. If the tactic was just to hand out more money to the trade unions, namely the ASLEF and the RMT, to stop this strike action, you know, they ended that strategy with Louise Hay's resignation and her replacement with Heidi Alexander. So it's clearly, you know, if there's a recognition that actually doling out billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash doesn't stop the strikes, then what is their new strategy to ensure that these strikes don't go ahead because, you know, ultimately these strikes, you know, when you name those dates, it makes it's really aggravating because, you know, it's designed to cause maximum disruption. This country needs to get back on its feet. People need to be able to feel that they can trust the train network so that they can go to work, so they can take up contracts, so they can, you know, the economy needs to move. And at the moment we had earlier this month, we had growth flatlining. It went down from a measly 0.1% to 0.0%. We need to get the country moving again. We can't get the country moving again if, you know, many people don't drive or many people need to travel long distances. They can't get on a train to go and do some work.
No, it's absolutely shocking. Terrible. It's not going anywhere good. Theo, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Have a good New Year. Theo Usherwood, a political commentator there, talking to us about the miserable time we're going to all have coming up in January. We're going to talk to John Redwood coming up in a moment. Sir John Redwood, no doubt, a former Conservative MP. He's been asking an awful lot of questions of the sums that have been done, not only by Rachel Reeves, but by Keir Starmer and by the Treasury as well. With all this tax money coming in, what's actually going to happen? This is Talk.
How many illegal migrants will enter the UK in 2025?
70,000 will come across the channel because this is going to get worse and worse and worse. We're going to end up with about 50,000 this year. Next year, I think 70,000. Labour have got no way of stopping this. No plans, no deterrence. They make this country more and more attractive for people to just jump onto boats.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:22. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, this is 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Back from the Christmas holidays, New Year looming, of course. There's going to be some strike action. There's going to be some bad weather. If you're travelling around, it's not going to be great. Also, you might want to watch out for people driving the wrong way down the road at you. Apparently, there's been a rise in that happening. I've witnessed it myself. Last couple of days over the weekend, a couple of German registered cars driving on the wrong side of the road. Extraordinary. If you've got any stories like that, we'd love to hear them. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk now, though, to Sir John Redwood, former Conservative MP. He's been very active recently, and greetings of the season to you, Sir John. Very active recently, talking about what this government could do to actually boost growth. They keep talking about boosting growth, but they keep sort of getting the reverse effect. Every time they say we want to boost growth, it seems to go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Yes, they certainly know how to do the opposite of what they promise. If you wanted a growth strategy, you wouldn't, for example, say that we can't get any more of our own oil and gas out of the ground and mustn't go exploring for it. There's a very well-paid industry that pays huge amounts of tax that they want to close down more quickly. You wouldn't say that our car industry making petrol and diesel cars has to stop making them before everybody else and not satisfy customers. That's another anti-growth measure. You wouldn't have the massively high carbon and energy taxes on industry, which means that we're closing all our blast furnaces to make steel, and we've closed down a lot of our ceramics, our glass, our paper, our aluminium. It's all anti-growth, deeply anti-industrial, and you'd have thought the Labour movement would be saying more strongly to this government, look, we are the Labour movement. We represent the industrial unions and the industrial workforce. We want to make things in Britain, because the whole Miliband-led strategy is to stop us making things in Britain, import them from abroad, and of course it's doubly crazy because we lose the jobs and the tax, and world CO2 goes up.
Right.
Because they're made in places that produce even more CO2, and you have all the marine diesel burnt in order to get the goods back here.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, the TUC have gone some way, haven't they, to agreeing with you in saying, actually, this net zero madness is actually going to cost too many jobs in Britain. So they're sort of halfway there. Do you think that's likely to increase if they really see pressure on jobs from their members? Because they're going to lose money that way.
Well, I hope it does, and I'm very much on their side. I think we do need a stronger industrial base. We need the revenues and the better paid jobs that produces. But we also see Chancellor Reeves in a real muddle over the numbers. I mean, she does a piece to camera a day or two ago saying that there's going to be all this extra money from VAT on private schools to improve the state schools, and yet her own Office of Budget Responsibility, which she believes in and wants to give a more prominent role, says that there are going to be 35,000 children over the next few years who need state school places because their parents can't afford to send them to a private school. So a lot of the money from the VAT is needed to buy all the extra teaching and places in the state schools. It doesn't produce the improvement.
Well, quite. And they're promising 6,500 more teachers, but I'm not sure, one, whether they can actually achieve that figure just by recruitment alone. And secondly, even if they do, it's less than one teacher for every 4 schools in Britain. So, I mean, it's hardly going to make much difference. We've already seen in Surrey, schools there saying we haven't got any spaces for any people coming out of the private sector. We're going to have to bus them to schools outside of the county.
Well, indeed, and you'd need quite a lot of those extra teachers for those extra school places in the way I've just been describing. Right. And you've got the same thing with the pensioner meanness. 10 million pensioners lose their winter fuel benefit.
Yes.
A few 100,000 will get a much bigger benefit, pensioner credit, because they'll qualify and they will claim it. And so quite a lot of the savings are removed in order to pay the extra pensioner credit, several times the amount that those minority pensioners would be getting, leaving well over 9 million pensioners still mugged and worse off.
Absolutely.
How does that make political sense or economic sense?
Well, indeed. And you've just tweeted today about the migration service and the hotels for illegal migrants as well, which is another huge cost to the government. You know, we're not going to pretend that it wasn't a problem for the Tories, because it was. But it's not getting any cheaper, is it?
Well, no, it's gone up. And Labour said they were going to close down the hotels. The Conservatives had started to do that. Too little, too late, but they'd started to do it. Now it's gone up again, and Labour just sort of shrugged their shoulders and say, well, these things happen, or they say they've had more calm days across the channel. Well, you've got to manage the borders, whatever the weather, and they need to get on with it. And we're seeing now an overall figure of about 5 billion a year on asylum and hotels and border policing. And this is a massively increased figure, and it's going up all the time.
And what do you make as well of this latest offer from Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? He's asked the watchdogs of this country, the various kind of regulators, to help him with some ideas about how to kickstart this sluggish economy. I mean, surely he's asking the wrong people, isn't he?
Well, I'd have thought so, but I mean, I'd welcome any idea they come forward that makes sense. And I've sent him lots of free ideas through the public press and pointed out that quite a lot of the regulations that he needs to remove to allow us to grow are ones that he has put in or has intensified. I mentioned a couple of them this morning, the ban on cars and the ban on oil and gas.
Yeah.
We are deliberately stopping people doing things in Britain that you need for a growth strategy. If you want to be the fastest growing major economy, as they originally said they wanted to do, America is the economy to beat. It's growing more than twice as fast as Europe, and it's already a lot richer than us in Europe. And if you look at what America has done in recent years, they've had a massive expansion of domestic oil and gas, which has generated huge wealth and tax revenue. They've been incredibly successful at technology. Whereas all that Europe does is it regulates the American technology and shows how jealous it is. We've got to get on with emulating it and beating it.
Absolutely right. And Elon Musk's in the Telegraph this morning saying basically that very few businesses want to invest in what Keir Starmer's New Britain is all about because it's not really an environment for entrepreneurs.
Well, I hope he's wrong. And my recommendations to the Prime Minister are all recommendations that would make us more attractive in the way that Mr Musk would approve. We certainly need to look again at our tax rates on entrepreneurs and small businesses and our business property taxes. Yeah. They are very uncompetitive. And I think the Conservatives and Labour were both wrong to stick corporation tax up to 25%. If you look just across the sea at the Republic of Ireland, they've had a much lower corporation tax rate for many years. They've been swamped with amazing good investments, particularly from America, that generate a lot of profits tax. And so with a much lower rate, the Republic of Ireland collects 4 times as much business tax per head as the UK does. Yeah. So we are mad to put on these high tax rates because it drives business away.
It does, absolutely right. So, John, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Have a very pleasant new year, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you very much indeed to John Redwood there. With a lot of sense being talked about this ridiculous notion that Keir Starmer seems to think if you keep saying it, it will just come true. If you keep promising people growth, it'll just happen. Well, that's not how it works. You know, they had a reasonably good economy in June. In July, when they inherited it, they killed it off. First of all, they started talking it down. Then they started taxing it. Then they started pulling the plug on things. And now, look where we are. We've got zero growth. We've got no idea of when there is going to be any growth. There's probably going to be a disaster looming in the economy. Elon Musk says nobody wants to invest in it. Absolutely and utterly ridiculous. How about this, says Amanda. Mike, Kemi Badenoch needs to direct all her criticisms towards Keir Starmer and Labour. It was a big mistake concentrating on Reform UK. Not a good look. And also, of course, she should get a past winner from MasterChef on. They would make a great team. I'm not quite sure who that is. How silly is big baby Badenoch, says Charlie in Cumbria. She should have said nothing, but instead threw her toys out of the pram like a petulant child. Voters across the board will see it for what it is, and it will only add to her lacklustre start. Well, we might have to talk to Kemi Badenoch coming up soon and find out why she actually said it and what she thought she was going to gain from doing it. 0344 499 1000. Strikes looming. Bad weather's coming down the pike. Flights being cancelled, foggy skies, obviously screwing everything up. We'll talk to Simon Calder, travel guru from The Independent, next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:33. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. We are in that period between Christmas and New Year where people say, nobody can remember what day it is. Nobody really knows what's going on. Well, it's not true, actually. A lot of people travel. A lot of people were stuck in the airports of Britain yesterday because the fog came down and an awful lot of flights were cancelled, meaning that they all had to spend their night at the airport and hopefully fly off today. It doesn't look quite so foggy today. But let's check in with Simon Calder, a travel guru at The Independent. I'm not sure where you are, Simon, but almost certainly somewhere more lavish and sort of interesting than where I am.
Nowhere is more interesting, Mike, than where you happen to be, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of all listeners and viewers when I say that. No, I'm actually in South London, which is quite a good place to be because it's not at Heathrow or Gatwick Airport.
Yes.
In particular, Gatwick, I've just been looking at the arrivals. There were so many flights cancelled at late notice yesterday. We got up to, I'm pretty guessing, I haven't done the final count yet, but last time I checked, it was 70 arrivals and departures.
Wow. So it was actually worse than the day before, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's certainly up to 80 or 90 departures. And just to translate that, that's about 15,000 people who are waking up this morning where they didn't intend to be. And that is on top of the tens of thousands of people who over the weekend, from actually Friday afternoon through to Sunday, were prevented from getting to where they needed to be because of fog. And if I can just run through exactly what happens, you've got perfectly good instrument landing systems, which have been around actually for decades, which allow planes to land. But because of how they work, you've got to slow things down on the ground. That reduces the number of movements by anything up to 50%. And if that is, extends the time that it takes by 50%, that reduces the number of movements by 1/3. And if you've got the world's busiest two-runway airport, Heathrow, and the busiest single-runway airport, Gatwick, then that is only going to end in one thing, and that is cancellations. And I spoke to lots of people yesterday who were just getting those creeping delays. They were quite often told 2 hours late, 3 hours late, 4 hours late, cancelled.
Well, my daughter was actually one of them, and she was due to fly out on the morning of yesterday, about 10:30. She got to the airport, it was delayed by an hour, then it was delayed by a couple more hours, and then she finally got on the plane, I think at around about 5 o'clock, and it taxied out onto the runway, only then to be told, we can't take off, we're going back, and so she's still there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, lots of people. I mean, that's doubly frustrating.
Yeah.
And,
so who chooses which flights go and which don't then, if there are some going?
Yeah, well, if you are in the EasyJet operations room at Luton, you have just got this kind of impossible game of three-dimensional chess. Who's where? How are their hours looking? Because that obviously becomes very significant. Where have we got, for example, empty seats on other flights? So that, for instance, if you've got 7 flights to and from Edinburgh, and actually you could fit everybody on 5 flights, then the first thing you do is you cancel 2 of those to give you a bit of breathing space. But
so it's the individual airlines that try and do it then, is it?
Oh yes, and so what happens is that the national NATS, the Air Traffic Control Service, says sorry everyone, you've got to reduce your schedule by 10%, 15, 20, 30%, and that will always affect EasyJet at Gatwick, the biggest airline there, and British Airways at Heathrow, the biggest airline there, far more than anybody else. And I'm so sorry about your daughter. She, being on a 10:30 flight yesterday was a good place to be in general, because there was a chance you'd get away with a 2-3 hour delay.
How's it looking today? Because she's got another flight booked, I think, with a different airline, and she's getting the other one refunded, but she's supposed to be taking off at 11:30 this morning. It looks a bit less foggy to me.
Yeah, I'm just looking down at the cancellations, and they are there's a random selection of out of Gatwick on EasyJet. We've got Belfast, Aberdeen, Inverness, Milan, Venice all cancelled. That will simply be planes and pilots being out of position. And that, there we are. If you're one of the 800, 900 people on those flights, that's extremely annoying. Plus you've got the flights going in the opposite direction, they're also cancelled. So that's tough, but it's recoverable. What we were seeing yesterday quite a lot of was people who'd been cancelled on Saturday being given new flights on Sunday, and those flights weren't going either, and it was all building up. And of course, just like before Christmas, there's lots of people who want to get where they need to be by midnight tomorrow. And that's looking increasingly difficult because the systems are looking so everything is still pretty sticky. British Airways, again, a relative handful of cancellations today, but unhelpful for those people. And I think that after this, there needs to be a really serious discussion. Are we scheduling too many flights in and out of UK airports in the depths of winter? Because it was only a week earlier, remember, on Sunday the 22nd, when we had 100 cancellations at Heathrow just because it was going to be windy. And maybe we reduce the number of flights so to a level where you're not going to see these last minute cancellations. Or we have conversations about, well, why have we got 15, 20, 30 flights between London and Edinburgh? Shouldn't we be putting people on the train, and that way it will free up a bit of space? Lots of questions to ask of the new Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, and I'm looking forward to you talking to her, and indeed talking to her myself about
well, I'd like to say I am going to talk to her, but she's not coming on this morning. But funnily enough, I don't know if you can find her, but I guess we can try and get her sometime later in the week when it's all calmed down a bit. But it hasn't calmed down, because it won't calm down, is it? We've got more bad weather coming in, which no doubt will affect not only the airports but also the roads and the railways. And then, of course, we've got those nice people from Avanti going on strike tomorrow.
Yes, let's do a sort of countdown to the end of the year. You're quite right. The weather is looking horrible. We already have speed restrictions in place across Scotland, so that means journeys taking longer, obviously, but also some cancellations because you don't have the trains and the crews available. Roads looking pretty horrible the further north that you get. I think last time I checked, there were 3 or 4 Met Office warnings about heavy rain, snow, and how that is going to...
it's called winter, isn't it? I mean, shouldn't we be better at this?
Well, yeah. I mean, it does... most definitely we should do, or we just decide, well, we're not going to go anywhere. But on the railways, so it was an absolutely horrible day yesterday. Particularly for people in northwest England. We had, I think, 9 lines run by Northern where there was simply no trains because they didn't have the staff.
Well, we've got no staff at all. You wouldn't find anyone. Oh, sorry, do you run a train company? Yeah. Have you got anyone that can drive a train? No.
Well, no, this is the conductors on the west side of the Pennines. They don't have to work on Sundays, and as increasingly they've shown, they really don't want to work on a Sunday, and why should they? You know, those are the rules. That's what they agreed to, and you would.
Well, I mean, that's another conversation as to why should they. I mean, if I was running the railway, they'd be working every day I asked them to work, frankly.
Well, we are all looking forward to the day when you are running the railways, and indeed the rest of the country, Mike, and things will be vastly improved.
Well, this idea that suddenly now they don't want to work Sundays is nonsensical, because they do. They just want more money for it, really, don't they?
Well, that takes us on to the strike. So tomorrow we get the first of 5 months of strikes by Avanti West Coast train managers, and their issue is that if they work on a day off during the week, they're being offered £250. If it's a weekend, they get £300, and they say that's not enough. And in order to press their point, they are going on strike tomorrow on the 2nd of January, so that's Thursday, then every Sunday from the 12th of January to the 25th of May. And they want more like what the senior managers who sometimes act as train managers get, and they particularly want more like what their colleagues who are at the front driving the train get, which is thanks to an agreement actually made during the Conservative government, they get a flat £600 for working on their day off.
Unbelievable.
And the train managers want some of that. And Heidi Alexander, Transport Secretary, did say, we want Avanti to get round the table with the RMT union, very much making it sound as though it was down to the
well, the seats
train
are still,
companies.
to be fair, the seats are still warm around the table because they're only just giving them a load of money last time around.
Yes.
You know.
Well, that was this is a sort of separate issue, but very much implying that it's the train operator at fault.
Yeah.
Labour is still very much saying, these private train companies, that's where all the problems lie. Well, not if you're a northern passenger, because they've been in public ownership for, I think, 4 years now. Right. But saying, well, you've got to, obviously, you've just got to give them more money. But at a time when the taxpayer, that's you actually, Mike, is paying £400 per second to keep the railways running, and I think we'd perhaps all agree that the railways aren't in the best shape.
No, I think it'd be cheaper if I just bought my own train, wouldn't it?
Yes, saying here's some more money, and let's hope things get better is one thing. But of course, the implication of this is, well, obviously you can't trust any trains because they're so unreliable, because if there isn't an infrastructure failure, then they're probably on strike, at which point all the people you need to attract back to the railways and all the new customers are saying, well, I'm not going anywhere near a train. I've heard how terrible they are.
I know. Absolute nightmare. Well, listen, I would say Happy New Year, but it's more in hope than expectation, really. But hopefully you're not having to go anywhere, Simon, and you can just hunker down and enjoy the last of the mince pies, and hopefully next week things might be a bit better.
Things can only get better. That'd be a good political slogan, wouldn't it?
It would be, but not in this case. Simon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder, travel guru at The Independent. Well, not much good news, I'm afraid, there. If you are still trying to get out of London or get back to London and you're listening to this, let us know what's going on, because we can tell everybody else what is actually happening on the ground. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's talk to Chris, who's in Cambridgeshire, wants to talk about Kemi Badenoch. Chris, very good morning to you.
Hello there.
How are you, sir?
Mate, just one little point, by the way, before we get to that.
Yeah.
If I ever want anyone kidnapping and held to ransom, I'll find a train driver.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, if you can find one, good luck to you, because apparently nobody who works for the railway companies can.
With the feet up, aren't they? Because it's Sunday.
Exactly. Incredible. What do you want to tell me about Kemi?
Look, I was prepared to give her a chance when she came along. But watching her on Wednesdays, she may be a great cheerleader, but I don't think she's a party leader.
No.
She doesn't have that power. Some people say, OK, what about Margaret Thatcher? She was a woman. Listen, if you crossed her, you would get beaten to death with a handbag.
Yes. And you wouldn't do it again, would you?
You're telling me you wouldn't?
No.
Yet every time, I'm afraid, this young lady stands up and has a go at a certain person, they end up laughing at her.
And there's no point, is there? I mean, we've learned over the course of time in all sorts of situations, whether it's a job situation or a family situation, if you're going to start going after somebody, you better win. Because if you don't win, you end up looking stupid.
You've got to choose your opponents as well.
Right. And I mean, taking on Nigel Farage for anybody is a pretty tall order, because he's a very shrewd individual.
For the wrong reason.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And you've got to be able to see that.
Yeah, I think so. And she doesn't appear to. Chris, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. As I said earlier, you would want to ask Kemi Badenoch. I'd like to ask her. You know, I interviewed her just before the leadership election that she won, and I was quite impressed with her. I thought she really, really came across well. A lot of people said in the interview that I did that actually they'd seen a side of her they'd never seen before. But since then, since she's been in charge, she doesn't appear to have done much right, I'm afraid. You know, she seems to make decisions on the hoof. She seems to decide just to kind of suddenly splurge with some idea of hers, or suddenly criticising somebody. She took on Keir Starmer, who is literally the easiest person to beat in a debate. I don't care what anybody says about his being a lawyer and all the rest of it, and a barrister and a very clever man. You know, he is very simple to beat in a debate, because you just throw a question at him that he can't answer, which is pretty much any question. But she went on the immigration idea, which was a stupid idea, because the Tories don't have anywhere to go on that. because they created the situation we've got. Coming up, we're going to talk a bit more about Jimmy Carter over in the United States of America, former president, of course, who died overnight, aged 100. Suzo says this, morning, great show. My family and me flew back from Madrid Saturday night with Ryanair and had a 3-hour delay. I guess it was due to fog. Ryanair gave us a €4 credit due to the delay, but only those with the Ryanair app got it. So most didn't. €4. Wow. What do you do with that? Packet of polos, anyone? Anyway, 99% of the retailers did not want to credit it. We only found one and could only get a bottle of water as everything is so expensive at Madrid Airport. There was hardly anything available for €4 or less. Well, that'll be one of those Euro rules, won't it? The EU have probably come up with that. Absolutely incredible. And one from Vicky, who says, my son is stuck in Poland, Mike. He was supposed to fly back to Gatwick on the 29th of December, which was yesterday. Ryanair can't get him another flight until the 3rd of January. Crikey. We obviously need to keep an eye on all of this. Coming up, we're going to speak to Ryan Harris, but keep those calls coming, keep your voice notes coming as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory.
Don't be ridiculous. Of course, these are genuine numbers because yesterday, in order to prove it, we had not one but 4 separate journalists and digital investigative journalists from Sky News, from The Spectator, The Telegraph, and The Financial Times, who all looked at what's called the back-end server, the database, with the Nation Builder database, so they could see the numbers, they could see new members joining.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham. Terry says this, sacked a lot of those train staff, £600 for a day off, more than the majority get for a week. Exactly right. I mean, that is a lot of money. Imagine not being happy with being paid 600 quid to work on a Sunday. And by the way, they don't have to work for very long. They only have to do a shift which involves probably driving one train for a couple of hours and then driving another train for another couple of hours. It's absolutely money for old rope. Shocking state of affairs, really. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call us on. Let's talk to Ryan Harris, though, who's now over in California, US journalist there. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Greetings of the season. I hope you had a good Christmas and all the rest of it. Let's talk about Jimmy Carter, a man for whom I suppose some Democrats might be longing to see the like of again, because they haven't really had anybody like Carter for a while, have they?
No, it's been a long time since we've had a Democrat. I mean, one can say, Democrats really loved Bill Clinton and Barack Obama.
Yeah.
But no, it's been a while since we've had a politician in either party that one can say is truly an honorable person. And a rare thing in politics, a man who, if he wasn't honest, he sure appeared to be genuinely honest. And I think he really... he started in the Navy, and I think really all Jimmy Carter ever wanted to do was serve his country with honor, and he did just that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's kind of what I meant, I suppose, because he came after, a pretty poor period for American politics and the nation itself. Watergate, Gerald Ford coming in, who famously was described as a man who couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, probably unfair. But then after Carter, you had the years of Reagan, which kind of, I think anyway, cemented, I suppose, if you want, the American dream and the American way. And that was 8 years of some pretty amazing times. And then when you got Clinton and Obama, it just wasn't the same, really. I know Democrats liked them, but they weren't sort of decent men, really, were they, like this guy?
No, and in fact, after George H.W. Bush, politics really, I think, did take a real turn there. I mean, Clinton certainly was rocked with a lot of scandal, but at the same time, a guy who never served in the military, was tough and made use of the U.S. military when he needed to, and provided the first balanced budget in decades. So, one could say that about Bill Clinton. But, to your point, too, Jimmy Carter took the Oval Office at really a rotten time. We were headed into a recession, which was in full swing during his term. And I remember my father, when Jimmy Carter would do those sort of fireside chats with his sweater on and say, well, we all need to pray for better times. And, my father would say, well, don't pray, do something.
Right.
And, there's only so much a president can do when you're in a recession. I mean, there's certainly, extraordinary measures that can be taken, but the business cycle is the business cycle, and it has to play itself out. And then, of course, there was the Iran hostage crisis, which Jimmy Carter could not solve. In fact, I met one of the guys when they were retiring the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, who was on that failed raid. And, they felt as badly as Jimmy Carter did. He felt terrible about that. But he did lead America in a time when, as you said, we'd had Richard Nixon and Watergate, then Gerald Ford, and things were not great. And he just really couldn't get the job done that people wanted to get done. And that's when we got the Ronald Reagan era. But I tell you, one of the things I admire about Jimmy Carter, as soon as he left office, I mean, the minute he left office, he got on a plane because those hostages had been released, and he went to meet them in Germany before even going home.
Yeah.
And, no other president would have done that.
No. And also, despite the mess that hostage attempted rescue was, he kind of came out of the Middle East with a pretty good reputation, didn't he? Because he'd actually done quite a lot and got himself a Nobel Peace Prize, I think, at one point, for managing to bring a certain element of peace to it for a little while.
Oh, well, we can't forget the Camp David Accords. That moment when Sadat and Begum shook hands, and it'll be a long time before you see something like that again. And that nearly failed. And Jimmy Carter essentially begged and pleaded with these men, stay here, let's work this out. And he pressed and he pressed, and he got a peace agreement, and that really began to reshape the Middle East. I mean, you still have peace between Egypt and Israel to this day.
Yeah, absolutely right. Ryan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Have a great new year. Ryan Harris, US journalist based in California there. Coming up in the next hour, James Price is going to join us, former government special advisor. How about this from Tony, who says this? Morning, Mike. Hope you had a nice Christmas. Well, here's looking forward to 2025. More immigrants, more tax rises, more NHS waiting times, more rail strikes, more Labour insanity. I can't wait for two-tier Keir to get his first good kicking in May, if the elections actually do go ahead, that is. Keep up the good work. And Rupert, one here from David, who says, Mike, it's great to hear these things from John Redwood, but why aren't we hearing it from the Conservative Party, not retired ministers? Badenoch is out of her depth, and Reform are making all the headway via Rupert Lowe. Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that. We're going to be talking to Reform coming up later on in the show, of course, because we need to find out just what it is that is spooking so many people inside the Conservative Party, and why they can't understand that actually attacking Reform is a pretty stupid idea. One here from Tim in Taunton. Mike, we had a short parliament in 1640. I don't remember that. He says, my New Year's resolution would be that history repeats itself. Great to have you back. Well, I mean, we could do with a short parliament now, couldn't we? We could do with a retread. Talk about a reset. Can we not sort of reform, if you like, the Labour government? Get rid of Keir Starmer, because he's a complete and utter dud. Get rid of half the cabinet, because none of them are working. Find somebody that can actually run an economy, so that would immediately exclude Rachel Reeves. And actually, let's get on with fixing Britain. You know, instead of breaking it. Starmer used to say the Tories broke Britain. Well, I don't think so. He's broken it completely now, and it's on its back side, quite frankly. Coming up, we'll take more of your calls as well. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham, of course. We have got 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single morning for you, right here from 6 until 10. Coming up at 10 o'clock, Alex Phillips will be joining us, and she'll tell us what's going on her show just before that. Coming up in this hour, though, we're going to speak to James Price, former Conservative government special advisor, of course, because he's got plenty to say about some of the big headlines in the papers this morning. To wit, councils letting staff work from the beach, that's the Daily Mail. Long-term sick toll rises, that's the Times. Labour to diversify the school curriculum, that's the Telegraph. And don't buy road drugs on the internet, that's the Express. Well, you might have thought maybe some people have been doing too many road drugs from the internet because the world has gone completely mad. Let's get a voice note from Claire in the Wirral.
Claire from the Wirral here. Kemi needs to nail her colours to the mast, but she can't because there are too many factions in the Conservative Party that are liberal and left-leaning, and this will show how divided they really are. This is the true dilemma of their party, who have lost their way, and I see Kemi as being establishment-driven, and so there's no hope. It's a busted flush, and Reform are now holding the cards as a true party of the once Conservative values. Thank you.
Claire, very sensible words from you there, and I think many people would echo them. What's Kemi Badenoch doing? Why is she taking on Nigel Farage? Why is she accusing Reform of cooking the books? It seems a very, very strange strategy. We've got lots more of that to come, plus a mega poll over the weekend that showed that Labour, if there was an election tomorrow, would lose 200 seats and their majority, plus several members of their cabinet, including Angela Rayner and Yvette Cooper and Wes Streeting. Absolutely extraordinary times. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Add to that, of course, we've still got people drowning in the Channel. That happened yesterday. We've still got the Chagos Islands story knocking around. Apparently they want £800 million a year from us in order to steward what it is that we didn't know they wanted in the first place. And Elon Musk has come out and said that very few companies are actually willing to invest in Sir Keir Starmer's broken Britain. Let's talk to James Price. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Very well indeed. Greetings of the season. I hope you had a good Christmas, and we're girding our loins ready for the new year and, you know, what can only be described as more strikes, more bad weather, more bad stewardship of the economy. Have you got anything to look forward to for us in 2025?
You described perfectly what a Labour administration is going to continue to look and feel like. At least for my part, I have got a wedding to look forward to, my own, at the end of March.
Excellent.
And that's something that Labour haven't banned yet and will struggle to take away from me.
No, they'll probably find a way of taxing it, though, more than you thought you were going to have to pay.
That's very true.
But let's talk about this mega poll, because I think even Labour hardliners will be shocked to see that if there was an election tomorrow, not only would they lose their majority, but they would lose 200 seats and possibly more. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, I mean, it's highly encouraging for everybody who believes in the future of this country and wants it to succeed.
Yeah.
It's only been 6 months or so since Labour have got in, and even a kind of hardcore partisan like me didn't believe it would be this bad this fast. I mean, really, it's to the point where it's not even funny. It is the country that's really suffering, and all the kind of political point scoring that the Conservatives could be making, that Reform could be making, anybody else. It is just disastrous to see how badly it's gone, and I think the polls really reflect that. I think the really interesting thing about it is that Kemi Badenoch hasn't had an awful long time in as leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition yet. You've got Reform, who are still, let's be honest, working out what it is they really believe. They did very well in the election, but you've got 5 MPs there who probably think all quite different things about different issues. So the kind of united opposition isn't really there yet, and yet Labour are still facing catastrophic losses. I guess the big question is, if that result were to happen in 4 years' time, I don't think it will. I think it'll be even worse for Labour by a long way. The question is probably what happens to the Reform and Conservative votes. But if it doesn't, if it stays like that, what do Reform and the Conservatives do? Because unless they've got some kind of agreement before or after an election, it's the only way that you could see slimy Sir Keir Starmer get back into number 10.
Well, this is the thing, and I mean, there are some parts of the Conservative Party that still don't seem to quite get the fact that Reform is here to stay, that it's not just a sort of, you know, a fly-by-night operation. They're building something, and they're building it rather cleverly, and they're building it slowly and surely, you know. So the idea that I've seen some former Tory MPs over the weekend kind of dismissing anyone who wants to vote Reform and say, well, if you vote Reform, you're just going to let Labour back in. So you can't do that. You must vote for us. Well, no, actually, because Reform would say, well, maybe it's the other way round. Maybe your wasted vote is a wasted vote for the Tories.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just can't stand that kind of attitude from some of my fellow members of the Conservative Party that says, well, we're the natural party of government. What on earth that stupid, fatuous statement actually means. The kind of arrogance, especially given how, frankly, we governed too many areas of this country for too long over the last 14 years. We've got absolutely no right to talk about that. I think on the point about standing aside or, you're just letting Labour in, I think both parties are probably right. It looks like Reform is set to do very well in Wales. It looks like they're set to do very well in all those red wall seats that Boris and Dominic Cummings and people like that won back in 2019, and that then Rishi Sunak lost 6 months ago or so. Why would the Conservatives mount serious attempts to try and take those sorts of seats when Reform have a great chance of unseating Labour? Meanwhile, the Conservatives have got a hell of a lot of seats in, let's say, the southwest where I'm from, lots of rural seats that we lost both to the Lib Dems and to the Labour Party. There's 100-odd Labour MPs representing rural communities. I mean, what they're doing to rural communities now, it's absolutely disgraceful. And everybody...
And isn't it interesting? It's interesting as well that many of those Labour MPs in those rural constituencies, when asked to kind of report and comment on what's being done to those rural communities, go very silent. They go very quiet. They don't want to talk about farmers. I mean, I was driving around the M25 yesterday, and you see an awful lot of signs, handmade signs put up by farmers on the side of motorways. Hands off our farms, hands off our inheritance tax, hands off this, that, and the other. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. There's an awful lot of anger out there in the rural communities, which I'm sure you know better than anyone.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I went home back to the countryside for Christmas. There was some bloke in London who said how nice London was, that all the gentrifiers have left for, and he must have misspelled Buckinghamshire. Because
I saw that, yes.
Very crude. And I have to say, I had a lovely time in Buckinghamshire with an F, because it didn't have all the problems that Labour-run London has had for a long time, like the zombie knife attacks and, children wearing, very young primary school-aged children wearing hijabs and all these sorts of things.
And it wasn't full of, interestingly enough, racists who all seem to live in London these days.
Yeah, exactly right. And, I think that I saw one of the tractors you can see on the screen now leaving one of these protests and driving back up the Kilburn High Road, which is, sorry, I've got the dog barking in the background, another benefit that you don't have in the countryside when you've got a garden to live out into. And you see these sorts of farmers who come up to London town and see just how radically it's changed. It must be quite a radicalising experience for these people to come up there.
Absolutely right. And let's talk as well about... yeah, don't worry. Let's talk as well about the national curriculum that Labour now want to change and probably for the worst. I mean, it's not surprising that we keep hearing from Labour, we're front-loading all the bad news. Well, no, you haven't got any good news. There is no such thing. Now they're talking about basically making the curriculum more diverse. I think we all know what that means. And once again, they're being led around by the nose by the National Association of Head Teachers and all sorts of other, lefty teaching unions who think that, let's get rid of all reference to any kind of history that Britain is ashamed of. Let's now start teaching about diversity and let's get, all white classes talking about things which are not white.
I mean, this is the thing, I think, that more than Ed Miliband's loony energy policies that will completely bankrupt us, I think that what Labour are doing in education is actually the biggest travesty. Because for all the failures of the Conservative government, they failed to fix lots of things, education was an unbelievable success.
Yeah.
Schools have got much, much, much better, notwithstanding the fact that the Tories didn't get some of the evil, horrible, disgusting woke nonsense out in time. At least kids were learning to read and write better than ever before. They were learning to do maths better than ever before. We've still got, great world-class universities, again, the woke nonsense in there notwithstanding, and really impressive achievements in technical education, more apprenticeships and things like that. And this disgrace of a woman, Bridget Phillipson, remember that name, the education secretary, is just a nasty, toxic figure. I really don't have enough nasty words to say about the policies that she's trying to enact. And this latest one today, Shakespeare's not relevant anymore. We shouldn't teach any of these kinds of old white dead men. Instead, we should teach whatever disgusting, toxic bile they want to pour into the ears of children. And she couldn't be more wrong about that. With things like William Shakespeare, the greatest writer of all time, that all Britons, no matter your background, no matter your skin colour, we can all unite around and be proud of. My old boss in government was a chap called Nadeem Zahawi.
Yes.
He was born in Baghdad and had to flee Baghdad with his family when Saddam Hussein tried to kill him and his family because they were Kurdish. And we know what Saddam did to the Kurds in his own country. He went and gassed them. Nadim came to this country, it welcomed him, and he became as English as anybody else, and then was the Member of Parliament for Shakespeare, for Stratford-on-Avon. And then he led the vaccine rollout and all these wonderful things. That is an example of somebody assimilating and integrating and understanding beauty and superiority of British culture and British values, and yet that is exactly the kind of stuff that this frankly evil woman wants to get rid of and stop our children learning. It's disgraceful.
It really is absolutely awful, and of course they don't like him because he's the wrong kind of ethnic minority, isn't he? Because he's a Tory. Oh my goodness me. You know, this idea that suddenly everybody who's not white has to be left-wing is so ridiculous and wrong that you'd think they would realise it, but they don't.
No, of course not. And of course, it's not Labour who've ever had any women prime ministers, not Labour who've ever had any ethnic minority prime ministers. Not only did we have Rishi Sunak, we also had Benjamin Disraeli back in the 1870s, who was born Jewish and, of course, had to convert there, but, you know, was very proud. And when attacked by this, he said, yeah, it's true that, you know, but my ancestors were priests in the Temple of Solomon when yours were all still worshipping around Stonehenge. But that was the kind of integration Britain was managing to do before anywhere else. And yet we're told we're uniquely evil and racist. This was the country that ended the transatlantic slave trade at the cost of, you know, tens of thousands of lives and huge amounts of blood and treasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely incredible stuff. Listen, have a great Christmas, what's left of it, and a great New Year, which is coming up very shortly, and a fantastic wedding. We'll see you before that, obviously. James Price, former Conservative Government Special Advisor, talking a great deal of sense there. Common sense. We are the home of common sense, let's not forget, because there isn't much of it going on inside of Downing Street. We're told, by the way, that Keir Starmer hasn't gone on holiday, or at least if he has, he's ferrying himself between Chequers and Number 10. We'll bring you updates on that as and when we can. Sharon from Staffordshire is not quite so optimistic. She says, Mike, I hope you and your family had a wonderful Christmas. The UK is broken and can never be fixed now thanks to useless Starmer. Well, I'm a bit more optimistic than you are. I think it can be fixed. I don't think he's broken it completely. But he's doing his best to try, isn't he? 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to speak to Gawain Tatler, former advisor to Nigel Farage, to find out just why Kemi Badenoch has picked a fight with reform.
I think that immigration, generally speaking, is good for the economy, and we have seen that over the last 100 years.
Targeted immigration is good for the economy.
Well, I would like to see a genuinely liberal labour market. The problem is, as we've discussed, the government have spent huge amounts of money on the welfare state, which mean that there is an active incentive financially for people to come here and not work and ultimately not contribute.
Well, let's go back to the small boats issue, because this is an issue.
Indeed.
And the government says they're going to smash the gangs. They haven't smashed the gangs, have they? We're seeing more and more boats coming over.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 18 minutes past 8. We're here with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, and then it's Alex Phillips taking over from 10 until 1. Jackie says, why isn't James Price leader of the Conservative Party? I might even renew my membership if that was so. Absolutely right, very good point. Just before we speak to Gawain Towler, former advisor to Nigel Farage, let's take a quick call from David, who's in Derby, wants to talk about train drivers. David, very good morning to you.
Good morning, mate.
Morning. What can I do for you?
I've been listening to the programme all morning. It's about a year ago. Obviously, I was talking to a train driver, and I
found one
knew
then?
what his wages were. It wasn't even my concern.
Yeah.
But he was scheduled, well, not scheduled, he was called in to take a train from Derby to Newcastle.
Right.
Now, part of the deal was, because obviously there was no train coming back that suited him, they laid a taxi on to bring him back from Newcastle to Derby.
Unbelievable. What, because he didn't want to drive one back, or there just wasn't one?
Well, there just wasn't a train at the time that suited him. So obviously I had no idea what they earned. It wasn't none of my business. Why would it be? And I thought, I cannot believe that a man goes from Derby to Newcastle driving a train. I mean, probably couldn't sit in a cafe or restaurant or whatever. Instead of paying him to have a meal for a few hours, they brought him back in a taxi.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose you've got to say they've got a good union apart from anything else. But, I mean, it's starting to take the mickey. If once they've finished going on strike, they just decide to go on another strike to get something else for them, and they're not happy with £600 a day for a couple of hours' work.
Well, I think what it is as well, if you look at it, we hear what the wages are and obviously but the amount of other perks that are probably under the table no one even knows about.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just at a football match talking. It was, I must rush off. I've got to take this train to Newcastle, but I won't be that bad because they're bringing me back.
Right. I know. Extraordinary.
What other perks are they getting? Well, we don't even know about.
Well, I think they do get taxis to wherever it is they have to get the train from as well. So yeah, it's all gravy for these guys. Amazing. David, good call. Thank you very much indeed. Mick in Wallington says the Education Secretary Phillipson wants to stop teaching great English literature because she doesn't understand it. It's ideological Marxism to dumb down everybody else. Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. Let's speak to Gawain Towler, though, former advisor to Nigel Farage, because all of you will probably have been watching, as I have over the past few days, since Boxing Day, in fact, a bit of a stramash, as we would call it in Scotland, between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. For some unknown reason, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, decided to start accusing Reform of cheating on their membership numbers and started accusing them of making it all up. Nobody knows why she did it. Gawain, maybe you can answer that question. Gawain, very good morning to you.
Good morning indeed, Mike. You're talking about stramashes. I'd come up with a nice Scottish word of numpty.
Yes.
Well, I think the funniest thing is you may have been looking at it. You're a journalist. I may have been looking at it because I'm a Reform type. What on earth, according to that first series of tweets that came rumbling out with bad spelling and bad grammar, what on earth was she doing fixated on our ticker?
Yeah.
And its back end? It does seem all rather strange. Surely she should be focusing on her issues, her problems, and the fact that she has no policies, than worrying about the insurgent coming up on her right.
Yeah, or very possibly having a look at what Keir Starmer's not doing to the economy to make it grow.
Well, the best thing's... Well, the very thought that Starmer is asking regulators how to improve the economy just fills me with cold sick. It is a fact. She knows. And one of the things that's very interesting, it's quite possible the way she's going, particularly if it is if Farage decides to take her on legally about the lies she made about him, accusing her of being fake, our numbers being fraudulent.
Yeah.
These are serious claims in the world of politics, because politics is all about trust.
Right. And also, you can't just come out with a load of statements and then the next day just kind of disappear and, like, pretend you didn't say them, you know, and, like, we're not going to follow this up at all. We're just going to brush it away, right?
It's apparent to me that she either has no media team or ignores them.
Or somebody suggested to me, possibly, because it was Boxing Day, they weren't sort of around, and so therefore she took it upon herself to do it from
trust
home.
Me, in my 20 years working for Farage, I was always available.
Yeah.
Whether it was a Boxing Day, Christmas Day, whether I was on the other side of the world one year.
Yeah.
In Australia, I was still available.
Right.
You're never not available. Or if you are, there's something going wrong.
No, but you know what I mean by that is what I mean is they're not sitting in the room with her to say, are you sure that's a good idea? Whereas if she's if she hasn't gone for their advice and they're not there, then she can perhaps go
I would
around
agree,
them.
but that itself is a question about her suitability to lead, that she doesn't go for advice, as opposed to that she does.
Yeah.
There will have been people available, or there should have been. And if she did go for advice, they should be fired. Simple as that.
Yeah.
She has turned what was a bit of fun, a bit of trolling on the part of Reform, putting this, flashing that stuff on Conservative Central Office, into a serious news story.
Yeah.
And worse than that, of course, the fact of the news story has meant that since Boxing Day, we've gone to over 150,000, more than 20,000 ahead. And even in the last 24 hours, we've gone up another 2,000 new members. And this is in large part not just to do with how brilliant Farage and Reform are, but how catastrophically ill-advised, and she is Ethelred the Unready. She is deeply unready in both the advice sense and in the other sense of the word unready.
Well, also, it's a good stunt. Let's put it that way. You know,
Farage is brilliant at stunts. He's always been brilliant at stunts. That's one of the things he's really good at.
But she's now made it, as you say, she's now made it like a serious story. So, you know, people might ask all manner of questions, but the bottom line will be the momentum is with Reform and not with her.
And she has walked. It's not so much a trap. It's more a heffalump trap than anything more than that.
Yeah.
But she's stumbled straight into it. The point is, this is silly season. And there are very few news stories out there.
Right.
Other than that, which we were talking just earlier about the education. And in a silly season, enter Britain's greatest political panto figure, and that's Farage.
Yeah.
And by gum, he's behind her, isn't he?
Well, he is. And also
right now,
Boxing Day, right in the middle of the silly season, you do it on Boxing Day when there really isn't anything else going on.
Yeah, but we didn't do it on Boxing Day. Our numbers just hit that.
I mean, she did it on Boxing Day, is what I mean.
Yeah, she did. She basically blew the gap. I hope she had a very good Christmas lunch. That's the only other excuse. They did remove, or they did lose Alex Wilde as the head of CCO Press only a few weeks ago, and in that time she's gone to war with sandwiches, she's gone to war with lunch, and each time Nigel goes boop, and she reacts.
Yeah, exactly right. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about this membership number, though, because she's also claimed that in the absence of any measurement of any kind, that the Conservative numbers have also gone up since she became leader, but she hasn't provided any proof of that.
Thousands of new members in that series of rambling tweets.
Yeah.
Thousands. Okay, fine. Show us.
Right.
Show us. Fine, no problem. Though I do note this. I have heard of, now I only see a small part of the world, and I'm not the eye of Sauron. I do not see everything, but I have not seen a single instance on any of my social media feeds, on anything, of anybody saying, with that Kemi, I'm joining the Tory party.
Right.
Just not seen it. Now, there may have been out there. I haven't seen any evidence of it. She claims thousands of new members. Now, I think what the thing is very, very interesting is the Tory party membership. They do their figures December the 31st to January the 1st, which is one of the reasons they sent out a whole bunch of leadership ballots to dead people and people who'd left the party, because they do a rationalisation on the 1st of January. My feeling is that 131,000 number of the Tories will have fallen off a very small cliff.
Do you think they might have pushed that forward a bit this year?
Well, but the point is, they do their rationalisation on the 1st of January.
Right.
So therefore, people who've died or left the party still get ballot papers. Now, I'm prepared to bet that if Kemi Badenoch does fall, and there is a new leadership election, we finally see their figures, because though she wants to check our back end, she ain't letting anybody see her back end. We've said we'll have it. We'll have a top 5 accountancy firm check ours. If you'll check it, you show me yours, and I'll show you ours.
It's all mad, though, isn't it? It's all completely mad. I mean, what does it all mean? I mean, if you are, as you say, if you're not an anorak like you, and I mean that in a pleasant way, and if you're not a hack like me, and you're just sitting around going, what's all this about? Why do I need to join any party? Can't I just vote for them? What's the point of joining them?
Well, but the point of joining in them is that you get involved. You are the local branch knows who you are. They can get in touch with you. They can invite you for drinks. They can invite you for cheese and wine. They can invite you to go out knocking on doors. But you build up, particularly with a party like Reform. One of the things that's very important about being a member of the party is the realisation, despite what the media have told you for such a long time, is you're not alone. You're not weird. You're not dodgy. There are lots of decent people out there who agree with you, who aren't going to shout at you. And one other thing... Well,
we've been doing that for years, of course, here at Talk.
Precisely. But there are another thing. There's a suggestion that quite a lot of these people... I mean, what sort of person joins a political party on Christmas Day?
Right.
I mean, what a bizarre thing to do. But there was the suggestion that it was sort of grandparents going to Christmas dinner with their family and being told their ghastly races and saying, damn this, I'm off to join Reform. I would say it may be the other way around. It's teenagers looking at their woke parents going, sod this, I'm going to join Reform. I suspect it's that way around just as much as the oldsters.
Yeah.
And so what you've got is a silly season story, a very brittle, very thin-skinned Tory party leader, and Nigel Farage enjoying himself no end, off to the hunt, with the dogs around him, with a pint of beer in his hand, having a whale of a time. And the contrast between these two figures, the scared, brittle, fragile Tory leader and the ebullient Farage, cuts through.
Yeah,
It
does. It does, and it all feeds into the narrative that he would want to have created, although, happily, she's created it for him, so he doesn't even have to be accused of stunting it up, because she's done it.
We could believe our luck.
I know. Extraordinary. Merry Christmas, I think we should get. As somebody said earlier on Twitter, looking forward to Kemi Badenoch being appointed full-time marketing director for Reform, since she's already done such a good job so far.
But it's a job that's... I don't believe the job's open, but maybe it should be.
Yeah, maybe. Gawain, good to talk to you. Have a good New Year. Thank you. Gawain Tatler there, former advisor to Nigel Farage. Let's get a voice note from Nick on Kemi.
Morning, Mike. Nick Moore, Loughborough. We shouldn't be surprised that Badenoch is so useless at the dispatch box, for she's just another globalist shill following the globalist agenda, as is Keir Starmer, and the election in July was merely a baton change in a relay race to maintain the illusion of democracy. This is why they're all terrified of Nigel Farage, and they're all terrified of Donald Trump's inception as the US president. We're in for change. Nigel Farage will be the next PM of this country. Best wishes, Mike.
Good to talk to you, Nick. I've been saying it for some time myself. Let's hear from Jason, who has something to say about Sir Keir Starmer.
Morning, Mike. Jason from Whitby. Now then, you do need to lay off Keir Starmer a little bit. The bloke's suffering with a little bit of dyslexia. He got mixed up. He smashed the economy instead of the gangs. Oh, dear.
Yeah, he got the hammer out and just missed the gangs and hit the economy. You're right. I think that's what's happened. And now we're in real trouble because Rachel Reeves has forgotten the key to the safe, which has got all her next set of instructions in it, and she can't find out what to do. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:33. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Sharon from Staffordshire says, we need change. We need Nigel Farage for sure. One story that came across our desk at the weekend, we haven't really mentioned too much, is the old collapse of Alistair Campbell's son's football betting syndicate. Apparently, the former Labour spin chief and his wife invested about 300,000 quid into what's been called the business venture of his son, Rory Campbell. And investors are threatening to sue and calling the police, because apparently they've all lost bucket loads of money. 5 million quid apparently has gone south. Nobody knows why. We're not suggesting there's any wrongdoing, of course. That would be entirely wrong. But a lot of people are very, shall we say, less than unpleased that Alistair Campbell has found himself in a bit of shtuck. Of course, you must gamble responsibly, and preferably not with anybody who's running a betting syndicate that's losing money, because if you can't make a betting syndicate make money, what can you do? Let's talk to Tim Bonner, Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance. He's here to talk about what might come in the new year, because farmers, of course, are still pretty angry with this government. Tim, very good morning to you.
Morning, morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Greetings of the season. I've seen quite a few sort of various different signs up over the course of the Christmas period. Driving around, you see the odd trailer parked on a field somewhere. You know, support for the farmers. Lots of farmers still pretty upset that what is coming their way, and there may be some blockades coming, I understand, in the new year.
Yeah, this one's not going away, and I think the government sort of know this, but they don't know how to handle it. It's so fundamental to the industry, to the countryside as a whole. Yeah, the family farm is the backbone of rural communities, and the idea that people are just going to say, "Oh well, that's fine. You can have my farm when I die," is not going to happen. It's going to be a long, a nasty and awkward campaign, I think, unless the government does the sensible thing, accepts that it was very badly advised, mainly because it only took advice from people who didn't understand the issues, and to find a way through this. And I think it's really important. An important point is, whatever you think of this government, it's actually not wrong about the principle. There are quite a lot of people who've been buying farmland to avoid inheritance tax. And that's not good for the farming industry, and obviously it's not good for the Treasury. Right. But the idea that you can't solve that problem without smashing the family farmers, the real farmers, people here, is nonsense. And we can find a way through this. Yeah, the NFU have been in discussions with at least some ministers, although I understand that the Chancellor hasn't yet met them. And yeah, there are plenty of proposals on the table which would resolve that issue. But I think we're now in one of those situations where it's about the government's ego. It's about not wanting to be seen to be any suggestion that they're back down, rather than finding a sensible way through this mess. Yeah, I think that's right. But it kind of it's sort of symptomatic, is it not, really, of what this government's been doing on all sorts of levels, like with VAT on private schools, like with the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, and now with the inheritance tax, not just for farmers, but also for everyone. They've used this rather sort of clumsy, broad brush approach to get everybody. And as you say, I mean, if people are using property and buying farmland up in order not to farm it, just so they can avoid inheritance tax, well, nobody really wants that to necessarily be something that's popular. But by the same token, the big argument seems to be around the sums, doesn't it? Because the farmers are saying, you know, the government's assertion that it's only going to affect a few farms is wrong. So when will they realise that those numbers are wrong? When will they admit that? Well, I mean, everyone's telling them. I mean, even I saw the Secretary General of the TUC came out against the inheritance. Well, I think even OBR's told them it's wrong, haven't they? Absolutely, everyone's told them it's wrong. But this isn't about, I think they know the sums are wrong. As I said, though, this is about how they're perceived. It's about Rachel Reeves's first big budget. It's about the big politics. And I think there's something been quite strange about the first 6 months of this government. So they were willing to talk in opposition in a way that probably the Labour Party hadn't been, to groups who, like the Countryside Alliance, who wouldn't be naturally best mates. We had some fairly rough conversations under the last Labour government, but we had some very progressive and quite sensible conversations before the election. And I think there are people there who want to understand, who want to change, who want to do this differently. They've got a whole raft of marginal seats in rural areas now, and there are 80 or 100 new Labour MPs sitting there thinking, Jesus, what on earth is going on here? Right. My whole voting days, having neutralised the rural issues, they've gone in on inheritance tax and made a mess of that. But also now we're hearing the same old nonsense about hunting. They want legislation on trail hunting. They want to massively boost the cost of a gun licence. There's other bits and pieces kicking around. Why do they want to do this stuff? It's really unnecessary. It's not on anyone's agenda as a priority, and all you're doing is ruining all the work you did before the election to try and neutralise this Labour versus the countryside thing.
Well, and that's always what it is, isn't it? Because it's like they're all sitting around in some kind of, smoked cafe latte shop somewhere in Camden Passage, deciding that, oh God, I get a nosebleed when I go outside the M25. It's just kind of that's how they live. And there are people actively who hate the countryside. They live in London. London has almost become a completely different country to the rest of Britain.
There's a bit of that, but I'm always generous and optimistic, and I'm a bit more cock up rather than conspiracy. And I think there are people there who are. I think there are some people, ministers at least, who are sensible. They want to try and make this work differently, the way it did last time. They want to change. They don't understand. Don't get me wrong. They really don't understand, and that's why this inheritance tax thing is so frustrating, because if they'd have the discussion, if they talk to farmers, if they talk to the farming unions, I'm sure, absolutely certain, they're going to come up with a way of tackling this problem of tax avoidance without smashing family farms.
But also, hang on, Keir Starmer did talk to the farming unions, didn't he? He went and spoke to the NFU's, national conference last year and assured them that he wouldn't do what he's just done.
He talked about respect, a renewed respect for the countryside, and he assured them that they wouldn't do that. And
so he lied to them.
A really difficult hurdle.
I know you want to be optimistic about this and fair, Tim, but he basically lied to them, and that's what he did.
I think they simply didn't understand what they're doing, and there's a bit of this as well. It's a bit like a Ladybird book. They think that that farmers sit around on little red tractors, without a cab, and have straw in their hair, and and have 50 acres. Have 50 acres. They put a cap on this thing of £1 million. Sadly, the reality is, if you want to make a living, a decent living, not be rich, a decent living out of farming, you are going to have assets. You have to have assets which are far greater than that, and they simply don't understand the industry.
And is there a simple way out for them? Could you say to them, for example, if you were to sit around a table with them today, look, this is your way out. This is how you can do it without losing too much face. It would not look bad for you to do this, and then you could save all of the trouble over here.
Well, look, I'm neither a tax expert or nor do I represent directly farmers, although many of our members are farmers. But I think there's one bit of this which is even worse than the rest of that, and that is that if you're a farmer, you say you're in your 80s, you're sitting in your farmhouse at the moment, the best possible advice you would have got before the election was to leave that in your name, not to transfer that. After the budget, if you die before the 1st of April 2026, then you're fine. You can pass your farm on without any inheritance tax. If you gift it today, then you've got to live for 7 years. So if you live 7 years, then you're fine. But if you die between the 1st of April 2026 and basically the end of 2031, then there is no way you can avoid this tax. So the first thing the government should do is to put this off for 7 years, because that allows everybody to do the tax planning, which the government is now telling them to do. It allows everyone to do that. Frankly, politically, it would shift the thing off into the next parliament as well. So it's probably a sensible move. And and then there can be a sensible discussion about how to bring inheritance tax on farmland where it doesn't affect actually family farms and generational farms.
But this is their other shibboleth, isn't it? Because they're making out that all of these manoeuvres that they're doing, and I include other ones as well, not just the inheritance tax for farmers, that it's going to raise suddenly all this money that they can then spend on the public sector to fix it. But in fact, it's not going to bring them any money in the short term at all, is it?
No, this isn't going to raise them any money in the short term, and in the long term, there may be people who were going to go and buy farmland to avoid inheritance tax, who will now go and avoid it in another way. I mean, I can't see how this, over time, I can't see how it raises them any money at all. Yeah. And what it will do is to do irreparable damage to the countryside. And don't forget that farmers are being asked to make this fundamental change at the moment anyway, which they're very supportive of. The move from direct support to, which essentially was subsidising people's food in the supermarket, to a much more environmentally focused support system and subsidy system. They're all up for that, but you can't do that if you're bankrupt, frankly, if you're paying $100,000 a year just to pay off the inheritance tax for your... Because
also, by the way, and I don't know whether you're a fundamentalist about this or not, but, all these cobblers about we must raise more tax because we must save the, public sector. I don't want to give any more tax to the bloody government, right? They take plenty of tax already. They only waste it anyway, and they don't know what they're doing. And, why don't they lose a couple of thousand civil servants and save themselves some money that way?
I think that's one for you rather than me. But,
sorry, I just wanted to get that off my chest. But there we are. Listen, Tim, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Tim Bonner, Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance. There are so many ways out of this, but the idea that Keir Starmer and his band of merry men and women and non-binary people basically all have this great idea that they're going to raise a load of money, which they can then give to the train drivers or the train operators or the bleeding junior doctors or whatever it is so that the world can be a better place for people in the public sector. Well, no. How about you get rid of some of the people in the public sector and then you can finally save some money and then you can put some more money into the public sector if you wish. Stop spending it on people who don't need any more money. Stop nicking it from the people who create the wealth in this country and stop ruining the bloody economy, you complete plonker, Starmer. Thank you. This is Talk. But I think there is only one winner, and it is the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer, he's a liar, he's a farmer harmer, two-tier, free gear, never here. Let's be clear. Keir, he wins it.
That was
Plank, not only of the week, matey, but plank
of the year.
Of the year.
Very well deserved.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:48. I'm Mike Graham. Coming up in this little part of the show, we're going to be playing you another clip from Plank of the Year because, of course, that's out there right now. If you missed it over the weekend, you can still watch it, and I highly recommend it. There's an awful lot of very, very tough competition, it has to be said. Also, we're going to be talking to some of you over the course of the next hour or so. We've got another hour and a bit to go before Alex Phillips. One from Michael in Birchington in Kent. Happy New Year, Mike. He says, have you noticed how many female cabinet ministers have the same hairstyle as Rachel from Accounts? Is it a plan? I don't know. We'll have a look. We'll check that out and see what's going on. Let's talk to Fiona McAnena, though. She's the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, because here's a story that'll wake you up for the first or last day of the year. Apparently, hundreds of trans hospital patients have been admitted to hospital as women, despite having conditions only suffered by men. Now, stick with me on this because it's quite difficult to explain. Analysis by The Sun suggested at least 482 were admitted as female in a year despite having prostate, testicle or penis issues. Sorry, where are you going? I'm off to the women's ward. Really? What's wrong with you? I've got something wrong with my penis. Right, OK then. Fiona, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, it sounds comical, but of course it's quite a serious story, this, and it's not comical, but it sort of should be. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I think it shows you the tussle, the kind of mental twists that people get themselves into when they start wanting everyone around them to pretend that they're the other sex.
Yeah.
And, you know, these people's testicles are evidence that you cannot change sex.
Right.
So I can't imagine what it's like for the hospital staff, never mind the other patients, to have men come in demanding to be called women, treated as women, maybe put on a women's ward. And yet they clearly have male health problems.
Yeah. I mean, can't they say in hospitals, and I know this is probably a ridiculous question in the world in which we now live, but why can't they say, look, if you've got a problem which has to do with your genitalia, which is clearly male, then I'm afraid you're going to have to be admitted as a male?
Well, I don't know what it means to be admitted as a male or a female. What matters is that you're in the right ward, that you're not imposing your delusions on other patients or the medical staff. And arguably, the problem goes right back to their medical records with their GP as well, because, you know, you've got one medical record in the NHS. So are these people who have changed their medical records to say they're women and then, much to the confusion of medical staff, turn up presenting with, you know, one of these male problems? So it just shows you the mess that people get into when they start demanding that everyone else engages in their belief. They should get the healthcare they need, but they really shouldn't be imposing their fantasies on other people.
But it also, I think, leads to misinformation then being produced, doesn't it? Because if they record all of these hospital admissions and they record them as women who are suffering from, say, prostate problems, then suddenly the next time you look at statistics, they go, well, look, here's a load of women with prostate problems. You go, well, no. You've just recorded them as women because they wanted you to, which doesn't make them women.
Yeah, and whilst people will quickly see through that one, where that's happening, and it's very serious, is in criminal records where we're seeing an unexplained rise in sexual assault by women. And guess what, Mike? You know, I think it's because they're men.
Yeah.
And in fact, some analysis has been done on that shows that it is indeed men being recorded as women who are causing an increase in supposed sex crimes by women. So we are getting a distorted view of reality.
Right.
And it's not good for anyone. And
we know that an awful lot of this is being driven by various different individual NHS trusts, don't we? Because we've seen all over the country various, instances of wording having to be changed, chest feeding instead of breastfeeding, you know, people with cervixes, all that kind of thing. 72 different genders, please sign here, tick there. You know, it's kind of like the place has been gripped by kind of madness.
Yeah, and it seems like women are not allowed to call ourselves women, but men are allowed to call themselves women.
Right.
You know, something's going very wrong here. And it's good that we're talking about it. It's good that the Department of Health has started to push back a little bit on this. I think there's a lot further to go, but the Tories proposed to amend the NHS constitution, and West Streeting seems to have supported that. So let's see.
Right.
Healthcare is important, and it doesn't need to be messed up with this kind of nonsense.
No, it really doesn't. And I mean, is there anything that say, organisations like your own can do to pressurise the healthcare systems of this country on behalf of women?
Yes, well, we and many others are doing that, both in terms of requiring single-sex wards, and also saying that recording data is really important. You know, there's some basic facts about people that can't change. One of them is whether you're male or female. It's important in many aspects of life. And we really need to get back to a system where that fundamental truth is recorded. You don't have to broadcast it, but sometimes it matters. And so that's an area we're also looking at.
Good stuff. We'll keep up the good work. We'll see what we can do to support it. Fiona, thank you very much indeed. Fiona McAnena, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. So once again, the story, 482 people, you could say, admitted as female to hospital in a year, despite having prostate, testicle or penis issues. I'm sorry, you're a bloke. If you've got testicles, you're a man. If you've got a penis, you're a man. And if you've got a prostate, you're a man, OK? Sit down over there with the other men, if that's all right with you. Coming up, we're going to speak to Nigel in Salford, who's got a very interesting story for us, right? First, though, Plank of the Year. I did promise you there's a lot of people nominated. Here's Russell Quirk nominating the Mayor of London.
15,000 knife crimes in 23-24, up 18%, 116 murders in the capital, 3.5 million total offences in the capital of Britain. And of course, he was the guy that really gave birth to two-tier policing, because all of this two-tier policing stuff started with the Palestinian pro-Hamas protesters.
And he's in charge of the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah. So exactly. So he is the man that's in charge of the police, which is obviously why he has a cross to bear in terms of all of this failure on crime. Then let's talk about TfL, strikes, bankrupt twice, an absolute disgrace. And then let's talk about housing, one of my favourite subjects. A man that said he would deliver 52,000 new homes a year, and he's barely delivered 25% of that. But still stands up at Mayor's Question Time and in the media saying what a fantastic job he's doing. He is the ultimate gaslighter, the ultimate liar, second potentially only to Keir Starmer. He's an utter disgrace.
I mean, it pretty much says it all, that, really. I mean, I wonder if Sadiq Khan could possibly win Plank of the Year. I mean, he's come very close the last 2 years. If it wasn't for Harry and Meghan, he would have definitely won it. But there we are. Let's talk to Nigel, who's in Salford. He's got a story for us about meeting somebody famous. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. Just a little story for you.
Go on.
So you might be interested in what you were speaking about with the sad death of Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
Went to what was one of the best seafood restaurants in this country in Liverpool with a business colleague for a meeting and a meal. We were sat down talking. I was facing the stairs. You actually went downstairs to this restaurant, and it was fabulous. In walked two of the biggest guys I've ever seen. Talk about brick outhouses. They had the earpieces in, the plastic ones.
Secret Service,
Yeah, and they were carrying as well. You could see the guns underneath their jackets. They had black jackets on, white shirts, black ties. And I said to my colleague, I said, what's going on here? And about 2 minutes later, you could see them talking to somebody. And about 2 minutes later, in walks Jimmy Carter down the stairs with two other guys behind him. So we had 4 Secret Service guys protecting him. He wasn't the president then, he'd finished. It was late 80s. What a gentleman. He came
Did you talk to him?
We were talking to him for about 10 minutes.
Nice.
As I say, what an absolute gentleman. And I said to him, why are you here? Well, he said, I'm here on government business for a conference, staying in one of the nice hotels in Liverpool. And he said, I'm an avid seafood lover. And he said, so I've come to sample what I'm told is the best seafood restaurant in Britain.
Wow.
It's called Jenny's.
Is it still there?
I'm not quite sure, Mike. I've retired now. I retired in 2013. So he came over. So, he said to me, he's sampling the seafood. And he answered for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Charming, yeah. I never met him, but I'm told he was a really lovely guy.
No airs, no graces.
Yeah.
You were talking to one of your mates.
Yeah, that's nice. What a nice story. Well, Nigel, thank you for sharing that with us. Very kind. Nigel in Salford there, he'd been meeting the peanut farmer, as he was known, Jimmy Carter, who was originally from Georgia, I think. And so very, very friendly character, very good guy. And somebody that I suppose in this day and age in politics you wouldn't see the like of, because it's not quite like that anymore, is it? Anyway, coming up, Brendan O'Neill's going to join us, chief political writer at Spiked Online. We'll take more of your calls, we'll take more of your voice notes, of course, as well. There's all kinds of stuff going on, including people working from beaches for local councils, people not working at all because they're anxious, people just not bothering to get up and get out and go and do something for a living. Why? Because they don't need to. Because they'll just get paid no matter what. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Last hour coming up.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball. Slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. The sun appears to be up. Well, when I say the sun is up, I don't know about the sun, but it's actually light at least. And so it is going to be pretty miserable over the next few days. And going into the new year, there's going to be strike action from the railways. There's going to be flight cancellations from all sorts of airlines because of the fog. It seems to be clearing a little bit today. So if you're trying to get away anywhere, do let us know how it's going. And if you are being given any of those €4 vouchers, be careful how you spend them, by the way, in whichever airport you find yourself in. Brendan O'Neill's coming up, chief political writer, of course, at Spikes Online. We'll be asking him about some of the big stories breaking this morning on the front pages of the papers. Councils letting their staff work from places like Ibiza and Australia. Sometimes you can just go abroad and work for the local council and never have to come home. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. The long-term sick toll is rising. More and more young women apparently just can't bring themselves to get a job because they're not very well mentally. Sounds mad to me. Certainly does indeed. Also fears over Labour's diversifying of the school curriculum. That's on the front page of the Telegraph. They want to get rid of all of that nasty, horrible stuff about British Empire and slavery and all of that, and just make out that everything should be more diverse. And that's what we want to teach our children, because that will be better than anything else. Absolutely incredible. Plus a mega poll which says that if there was an election tomorrow, basically, Labour would lose their majority. Over 200 seats would go back to the Tories, to Reform, and to the SNP as well. 0344 499 1000. If you want to get in touch, here's how you do it.
Morning, Mike. John from Derbyshire here.
Hi, Mike. It's Kim here.
Hi, Mike. David in Portsmouth. Great show as always.
Hi, Mike. I love your show so much.
Mike, Tony from Nottingham.
Morning, Mike. Mike from High Wycombe. Lovely to listen.
Good morning, Michael. Always good to have a spot of Mike Graham in the morning.
It certainly is. Stephen Middlesbrough says, morning, Mike. Thank God you're back. Not only are they scared of Farage and Reform, they're also petrified of the masses. Keep holding them to account. Don't give them an inch. Well, we try not to here at the home of common sense. We don't give them an inch. We give them a hard time because that's what they deserve. They don't know what they're doing. They're ruining the economy. They're screwing up every single thing that we hold dear. And now they want to have a go at the kids. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Keir Starmer's now so desperate for money and for ideas that he's asking regulators around the country. So he's asking Ofwat, Ofgem, Off-Track, well, it's off in a lot of these things, Ofcom. He's asking all of them, what can we do to get growth back? Here's Kieran on Keir Starmer.
Everything he's touched has turned to gold, hasn't it? He's well liked. His policies make sense. We're all better off. Our taxes are lower. The economy's growing. Inflation's down. People are happier. Opposition parties' memberships are shrinking, and if there was an election tomorrow, he would absolutely get a landslide. No, sorry, all of that was wrong. Happy New Year, 5 years of Keith. God help us.
Yeah, Kieran, thank you very much indeed. Very well pointed out, in fact. I mean, you could run through the entire list there, can't you, and just go, yep, tick, 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 tick. Yeah, everything's down the gurgler. Brendan O'Neill is here, thankfully, to help us out. Brendan, very good morning to you.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad at all, not bad at all. Looking forward to 2025 for more laughs from this increasingly humorous and comical government who don't seem to know their arse to their elbow, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What a disaster this government has been. I mean, that's really the story of 2024. I know it was a big year stories-wise. Lots of things happened.
Yeah.
But here in the UK, surely the biggest story is that we now live under the most incompetent government in history.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not particularly surprising to those of us who never had much faith in Keir Starmer to begin with. But, you know, they did tell us they were the adults coming back into the room.
Incredible.
This was the return of the experts, return of the calm thinkers after years of Boris and Brexit and all the chaos. And yet they, as you say, they don't know their what's it from their elbow. They don't know what they're doing. We've had riots. We've had authoritarian clampdowns. We've had betrayals of almost everything they said in their manifesto. We've had tax hikes on farmers, on working class people. We've had the winter fuel allowance scandal. It's been one disaster after another with this government, and I'm not surprised at all at that mega poll showing that they would lose badly if there were to be an election now.
That's it. And with every step, they make another misstep. You know, I mean, this morning, here we are. I've been doing this now for, 6 months plus since they got in on July the 4th. And every day you come in and you think, well, they can't make anything any worse, surely, can they? Today, we find out that bloody Bridget Phillipson, who seems to have been sort of honed out of the Marxist school of rewriting history, wants to completely change the school curriculum and make it more diverse and make it less about, you know, a monoculture, i.e. British culture, and turn it into something that nobody's going to recognise.
You know, this is a really disastrous suggestion from Bridget Phillipson because, firstly, education is supposed to be about communicating the best of knowledge to kids. It's not supposed to be about brainwashing them into the ideology of multiculturalism or the ideology of diversity, whatever passing fad the political class thinks is important. That's not what education is supposed to be about. Education is supposed to be about teaching kids the greatest ideas and the important moments in history, maths and English, and all that solid stuff that will help them get through life. And yet here we have Labour politicising education, and apparently some of the submissions to Bridget Phillipson from the teachers' trade unions have suggested that the curriculum must be decolonised, that we must get rid of, as you say, any monocultural view of Britain and celebrate that diversity, etc., etc. This is the use of education as a political tool to socially engineer the next generation. Let's be truthful about what's happening here. And there's a class war element to all of this. You know, a couple of weeks ago, Labour announced that it was scrapping Latin in state schools so that, you know, why on earth would poor and working class kids want to learn Latin? Let's leave that to the posh kids at private schools, and the poor kids can just learn about how to do graffiti, or why it's important to be diverse, or why we must all play along with the ideology of multiculturalism. There is this idea that less well-off kids are not capable of important forms of education and instead need to be dictated to. I find it really obnoxious.
It's patronising as hell as well, isn't it? Because you've got a British country here which may or may not be described accurately as multicultural, multi-ethnic, whatever it is. What I've described it is as a ghettoised country now, because you've got cities in this country which are entirely ethnically obsessed and completely and utterly ethnically occupied, if you like. And then you've got most of the country which is outside of the cities, which is largely white. And so, you know, we've got a sort of a split personality about all this, haven't we?
Yeah, we live in a very balkanised country. Lots of people now live in their own ethnic bubbles, their own cultural bubbles. And I know it's fashionable on the left to say, whoopee, you know, celebrate diversity.
Yeah, it's great.
All cultures are equally valid. But actually, it's a recipe for division. It's a recipe for tension. It's a recipe for social conflict. And we've seen that over the past few years with the explosions of riots and the explosions of street battles and the explosions of all sorts of ethnic and communal tensions in a supposedly modern, democratic, secular country like Britain. So multiculturalism has wrought a lot of problems for our country. You know, one thing that schools should do is bring kids together. Kids can come from any background. You know, my parents are Irish. They're immigrants. I'm the son of an immigrant, but so that's fine. I have no problem with people who are kids of immigrants, of course. But at school, what you should be taught is that this is Britain. This is the British flag. This is this is who we stand up to. This is who we salute. This is what our country's history is about. School can be a very unifying experience, even in a country as diverse and sometimes conflictual as ours. But what Labour is going to do is use education to repeat all of those tensions that exist in society. So kids are now going to be force-fed all this multicultural nonsense and all this diversity nonsense. So it's a recipe for future tension and future division in the playground and in society more broadly.
And let's face it, you know, I've got kids who have been through the state school system. They're just sort of coming out the other end of it now. But basically, it hasn't exactly been, you know, Thatcherism that they've been being taught for the last 6 or 7 years. You know, they're already pretty left-wing, the teaching unions and the teachers. And every single time I went to visit my son's secondary school, the only thing that you could see as a common thread on every single notice board and every single corridor that you walked around was a bloody poster from Stonewall. And I'm going, why have we got that in a school? What's going on with that?
Absolutely right. Well, that's the irony of Bridget Phillipson's proposal, which is that a lot of this stuff has already been happening for quite some time. And I'm worried at the extent to which schools have become almost, you know, industries of self-loathing. because kids are so often taught now to feel ashamed of British history, to think that this country was born in the sin of colonialism and the sin of empire and the sin of slavery, and we will never wash those sins away. We will have to atone for them for the rest of time. Lots of kids are constantly getting that message from school, when they go to university, in popular culture. They're being educated to hate the nation in which they live.
Yeah.
And I don't think the political class understands how dangerous it is to teach a whole new generation that the country they come from is a rotten place.
Right.
Really dangerous thing to do, and I do think that Bridget Phillipson's meddling with the curriculum is going to intensify that trend.
I mean, it will, totally. And I see even King Charles getting on the act. You know, I didn't actually witness live the King's Christmas address this Christmas, but I caught up with it later on Christmas Day night. And I couldn't quite believe my eyes and ears when I saw Charles deliberately making a point of saying how great it was that, you know, the teams of people that cleared up after the riots in the summer because it showed how great multiculturalism is. I was like, why is he even going there?
I know, why would he touch something like that? And the royal family, they will, now that the Queen has gone, R.I.P., you know, she was really the last thread that we had to our own history. She was the living embodiment of British history in many ways. And now that she's gone, I think even the royal family is going to get in on this fashionable self-flagellation.
Right.
You know, this trend among the establishment to constantly whip themselves on the back for all the crimes of history, and to tell the rest of us that we need to do likewise. And then they're surprised when people tear down statues or say, I hate Winston Churchill, or when school kids say, you know, it's racist to think this or it's racist to say that. It's so lethal, I think, to tell people that the country they come from is a horrible place. And that's the message we're now getting from everyone, and we will soon get it even from the royal family themselves.
I know, incredible. Which leads us on to the other two stories I wanted to talk about today, which is the Times front page, rising toll of young adults too ill to work. Women under 25 now not having children so that they can't work, but actually are too ill to work and are not going in bigger and bigger numbers. And, of course, then, leading on to the next bit, on the front page of the Mail, councils allowing people to work from the beach. I mean, is it any wonder the economy's down the gurgler?
I mean, it is just astonishing. That council story, I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining things.
I know.
You know, one council worker worked from Ibiza for 4 years. And you just think to yourself, here we are in Britain, in our local councils, struggling to, you know, have our bins emptied on time or to make sure that the street lights are working and all the other problems that we have to deal with.
Council tax going up, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Council tax, etc. And then the council workers who are supposed to be serving us and making sure that our local community ticks along, a lot of them, 731, I think, worked abroad last in 2023. They worked in Australia, Ibiza, all these lovely sunny places. I'm sorry, but if you work for a local council, to understand that place, you need to live there, or you need to at least visit there, get the bus there every morning to your workplace. You need to understand the community, the people who live there and the problems that they face. You cannot be a serious local council worker if you're in Ibiza sunning it up by the beach. That simply doesn't work.
No, and similarly, you can't get yourself into a kind of a working scenario by being too ill to go to work and just not... I mean, what are you going to do all day?
You know, this rising number of young people who are too ill to work, I find that really terrifying because it suggests that the next generation is actually pretty broken. And I think this is what happens when you educate young people to be vulnerable, when you swaddle them in cotton wool and you tell them that they must always hide in a safe space and that words might hurt them and offensive ideas might damage their self-esteem. You teach them to be fragile. You teach them to be fragile little creatures who think they're ill, but they're not ill. They've been educated to imagine that they have mental illnesses when most of them do not. These are just the trials and tribulations of living in modern society, and most of us have to deal with that, and we should have to deal with that. I do think that we've created a generation that is so fragile, conceives of itself as being so weak that now they can't even get out the front door and go to work. But this is a burden we've created for ourselves, and we need to address it.
Totally
really
right. I mean, we played a clip, I think, on Plank of the Week the other week about it was a sort of American sort of roving reporter going out in a campus in American university somewhere in California asking people what they thought a safe space was. And the safe space to them was not just somewhere where they could feel safe, but where they also wouldn't be ridiculed. And you're going, well, you want to go through life not being ridiculed? Well, then don't do anything stupid, and then you won't be ridiculed.
Absolutely. And, you know, we have a twofold problem at the moment. We either have young people who are not going to work because they think they're ill, or we have young people going to work and bringing all those awful ideas they picked up at university about, you know, the scariness of offensive words and the need for safe spaces and the need for gender-neutral toilets or whatever other rubbish they've been educated to take on board. So we have the worst of both worlds. Either young people are at home with their feet up saying, I've got a mental health problem, or they're in work telling the oldies that they've got to respect everyone's pronouns and never say an offensive word and never tell an un-PC joke. You know, these kind of woke tyrants of the next generation, there is a problem there. And I think the sooner we address it at the school level and at the university level, the better off we'll be.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, I think the new Syrian leader, when he appeared on CNN, sort of made out peak sort of wokery when it was, you know, this guy who's come in, who's a former member of Al-Qaeda, and actually put his name up, Al-Jabari, whatever it is, and then it went he, him. As a pronoun, you go, sorry? What, so the Syrian former terrorist is now a he, him? I mean, just unbelievable. Incredible. Anyway, listen, Brendan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Lots of common sense coming from him. Lots of common sense coming from you, of course, as well. Steph says this, good to see you back, Mike. The government could save money by abolishing the House of Lords, the world's most expensive old people's home. If there must be a second chamber, it must be a very small number of elected representatives. I agree with you about that. Keir Starmer said he was going to do away with the House of Lords, and then what did he do? He put Sue Gray in there and a load of other people who he's decided that he wants to have as peers of the realm. So more lies from Starmer, the harmer. This is Talk.
Tell me about the monkey. The monkey is, he said in previous interviews that he felt like he was a performing monkey, especially on the early days. Nigel Martin Smith putting Take That together. It also has more of an explanation when you watch the movie. He's always had this kind of fear of people in the audience hating him. And I suppose it's like the imposter syndrome thing of seeing people in the audience going, you're not talented, you shouldn't be doing this. And he's always kind of pictured that person as an ape in the audience.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:22. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Back with you just before New Year and back, of course, later on this week as well. We're going to speak to Julian Jessup, independent economist, right now. Before we do that, now, how about this from Stuart? He says, Mike, you know the country's in dire trouble when the PM is asking the regulators for growth, who aren't exactly known for being engines of the economy. While he's at it, maybe you should ask train drivers how to improve the NHS or teachers how to improve potholes. Yeah, very good point. I don't see what the point is of asking regulators, but this is the trouble with people who only understand the state sector. They only understand regulators. They only understand quangos. They only understand the public sector. They don't get growth because they don't really know how to achieve it. They think they can get it by taxing loads of people so that they spend less money in the economy voluntarily. Well, that's not how you get growth. Anyone can tell you that. Julian Jessup, I'm sure, would agree. Julian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, apparently, Ofgem, Ofwat, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Competition and Markets Authority are all engines of growth, and we should be seeking their advice so that we know how to make it happen.
Well, it certainly does smack of desperation. If the newspaper reports are to be believed, the regulators were sent a letter on Christmas Eve asking them to come up with pro-growth ideas by mid-January. So they've been set a very tight deadline to do something they've not really ever had to do before. But it is the season of goodwill still, so I'm going to try and look at this as a positive thing.
OK, good luck. I should look forward to this then.
Yes, I mean, you obviously can't regulate your way to growth, but you can deregulate your way to growth.
Yeah.
So if you set these people a clear mandate and say, look, you have to come up with specific ideas to reduce the amount of regulation that we have in the economy, and that boosts growth. And I think that's something we should welcome. It's worth saying, too, that this is basically continuing a programme set in place by the previous government. So, Jeremy Hunt, when he was Chancellor, Kemi Badenoch, when she was Business Secretary, wrote a letter in November 2023 strengthening the so-called growth duty on regulators. So in a sense, Labour's just continuing what the Conservatives were doing. The question, of course, is whether this government in particular has any real appetite for doing this. I mean, it's a cabinet with nobody with any real business experience in it. In almost every other field of life, they're increasing the role of the state rather than rolling it back. So I think the jury is going to be out for some time whether this will actually deliver anything meaningful. But the idea of asking regulators to come up with ideas to boost the economy by effectively doing less, I think has to be a good one.
Maybe. But, I mean, don't believe there will be such a thing as a regulator who wants to do less because that's not what they're about. They're about more regulation every single time you ask them, aren't they? And as a matter of interest, did they answer the letter that they got from the Tories? And if so, what did they say in it?
Well, there are a few regulators, I think, that deserve a bit of credit. So some of the regulators in financial services, for example, have been quite good in rolling back some of the regulations that we don't really need. So ridiculous regulations on the amount of information that retail investors need, for example. And there have been some positive changes over the last few years, admittedly driven by government. So getting rid of the bankers' bonus cap. I know that's not a particularly popular idea, but it was a regulation that no longer served any useful purpose and was damaging the competitiveness of the city. So there are a few positive examples, particularly in financial services. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole culture of being a regulator is to err on the side of caution. I mean, this is seen in spades. Anything the European Union does is basically clamping down on growth. They just like doing more and more. So it's quite a shift in culture to get regulators to agree effectively to do less. It's sort of like, asking turkeys to choose the right date for Christmas or whatever else.
And so far, since they've been in, I mean, they seem to have fundamentally misunderstood the way that the economy works, because having come in what was, I would say, reasonable sort of economic health, and I know, you'll probably say, well, we weren't doing brilliantly, but I mean, as a G7 country, we were doing better than many others. In 6 months, they've managed to lose that momentum and take us into a kind of negative growth area, because they seem to be obsessed with only really getting sort of public sector investment. as a vehicle for growth. You know, they've, Keir Starmer went over to Saudi Arabia to try and get partnerships with the Saudis to build a load of, green projects in the UK, housing, carbon capture and all of this. It's almost like trying to persuade private companies to put money into joint ventures with government. That seems to be the way they think you grow an economy.
I think, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the irony is that a lot of the problem over the last few decades has been that the state has got too big, and yet we now have a government that thinks the solution is an even bigger state.
Right.
So the budget effectively is going to transfer another 2% or so of national income from the private sector to the public sector at a time when the tax burden is already at a record high and productivity, particularly in public services, is very low. And if we look at specific policy areas, I mean, in particular things like the labour market, so another big increase in employment rights, which are great for some workers, but increased rights creates increased obligations for employers.
And costs.
Exactly, more costs, more expensive to hire and fire workers, which means that, companies will do less of that.
Yeah.
So, some workers will benefit, but many others won't.
And that's before you mentioned national insurance increases as well.
Exactly, that's another good example of a effectively anti-business policy. The argument seems to be that national insurance is paid by businesses and therefore doesn't affect working people. But of course it does, because it's passed on in the form of lower wages, higher prices, and in many cases job losses. So there's a perception that businesses are not part of the economy in some way, that you can regulate them, you can tax them, and it doesn't affect real people. But quite the opposite is true. Businesses are just things on paper, they're paper entities. Anything you do to them will ultimately impact real people.
And an awful lot of it's about confidence. And one of the things that they did badly, I think, in the beginning of their tenure, at the first 2 or 3 months, was to talk the economy down to such an extent that while people were waiting around for the budget to come, they weren't investing. And they were going, well, we're not quite sure where they're going with this, so we're not going to put any money in. We got Elon Musk today saying in a letter to Scottish politicians, basically, that very few companies will be willing to invest in the UK because of the current administration, which he says is not really friendly to wealth creators.
Well, that's right. I mean, Labour was claiming to be the new party of business, and of course that now rings extremely hollow. They definitely made a mistake. I think even Labour ministers recognise this, that they talked down the economy too much over the summer. But then they capped that off with a budget that introduced much bigger increases in tax and other business costs than anybody had anticipated. And it's not just the budget, it's all the other things they're doing around interventions in the labour market, in energy policy, we haven't touched yet on Ed Miliband, and everything else that they're doing. So, and I'd love to give them the benefit of the doubt on these regulatory changes as well, and other areas like reform of pensions and planning. But the initial signs are not encouraging. Looking at the makeup of the cabinet, it's not obvious that a lot of people are really buying into this. You haven't got any figure like Argentina's new leader, Milei, or anything close to that in the Labour government. Not at all. And in fact, quite the reverse. There is no public body, and I include what I would regard as the wokest Bank of England and even the OBR. These are not exactly, hardline conservative think tank type people. They're saying it's a disaster. There's nothing good that came out of the budget. There's nothing good that's going to come out of it in the coming year. And I mean, I suppose the question now is, Julian, is it something that they're going to have to look at reversing? Well, I think they're going to hope that something comes along to rescue them. And there are a few positives. You mentioned the Bank of England. I think the Bank of England might now be willing to cut interest rates more aggressively than it was before, focusing more on growth than any short-term impact on inflation. I think also the external environment as well. I mean, it's not just the UK that slowed sharply over the course of this year. Big problems in Germany and France and uncertainties about the US. Maybe the external environment will improve. Things could start to turn around in Germany in particular if they loosen their fiscal rules. When Trump comes in, maybe he won't be as bad as some people fear, might actually be quite good. So I think they'll try and hang on a bit longer. I think the second half of next year will look a lot better than the first. But for now, at least, unambiguously grim. It looks like the December retail sales figures will be poor again. Pretty much nobody went shopping apparently on Boxing Day, which is unusual. They obviously didn't see the pictures from Westfield Shopping Centre, did they? No. I mean, we went shopping ourselves, and we're pretty much the only people there. Really? So, interesting. There's certainly some signs that the hangover in terms of the impact on consumer confidence as well as business confidence and sentiment in the market are going to continue for some time yet. And of course, the main budget measures haven't even been introduced yet. It's not until April that national insurance actually goes up and the national minimum wage rises. So, the first half of the year, I think, is bound to be weak because of all the uncertainties. But I'm a bit more optimistic that things will start to turn around in the second. For a start, most families will still see their incomes rise faster than prices. We will get, I think, bigger interest rate cuts. The increase in public spending is not going to be brilliant, but it will offset some of the weakness in the private sector. So I'm not all doom and gloom for next year, but the economy is certainly weaker than it needs to be as a result of government policies.
Indeed. Julian, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Have a good new year. Julian Jessup, independent economist there, with his take on what's likely to come in the coming year. Certainly in the next few months, it's not going to be much fun, I don't think, for anyone. Margaret says this, the first classic book I read was Great Expectations. Imagine the woke brigade banning Dickens in our schools like they did with Shakespeare. And Sharon from Staffordshire, Brendan O'Neill, I agree with you. These young people put everything down to mental health, yet they are happy to say on social media all day, I say get them up and out and don't give them any money. They don't deserve it. Well, this is the thing. If you make it more difficult for people to lounge about and get money for nothing, they'll suddenly find themselves in a position to say, actually, I better go and get a job, otherwise I don't have anything. That's the way to do it, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're going to be speaking to Chris McGovern, chair of the Campaign for Real Education, coming up in a little while. We'll find out what he makes of the change in curriculum for the schools of this country. We're going to make it decolonised and more less monocultural, apparently. Also, I want to talk some more about these cars that are going down the road the wrong way. We mentioned it a couple of times earlier. I said earlier in the show, I've seen 2 cars in literally the last 2 or 3 days driving down the wrong side of the road, both of them with German plates on. They just happen to be German, but they're clearly tourists over here, driving on the wrong side of the road. One of them went up the drive-through of a coffee shop, the drive-through section, the wrong way. I mean, just entirely mad. Who does that? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips will be here then, taking over from 10 until 1. How about this from Mike in Herne Bay? He says, Mike, I quit the Conservative Party on Saturday. Not only was the website clumsy, but I was even asked what was my reason for leaving. I then received an email saying they would deal with my inquiry when they reopened on the 2nd of January. I'm joining Reform. Great show as ever. Well, that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? The Tories are stuck in analogue mode, whereas Reform are way ahead of them on digital, basically making it happen, waiting for all the Conservatives to wake up from their long, long holiday from Christmas to New Year. We'll be back on the 2nd. I mean, incredible. I could tell you a couple of stories, but I'll save them for later in the week about some of the shopping experiences that we had over the course of the last few days. Absolutely extraordinary. But let's talk now, though, to Chris McGovern, chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, because the front page of the Telegraph today rather hauntingly says Labour to diversify the national curriculum. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has begun a review to refresh, in her words, what is taught in schools, pledging to, in their words, breathe new life into our outdated curriculum. Apparently they want to decolonise it and make it less monocultural. Well, I didn't think that our curriculum was particularly outdated. Chris, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, well, you all know what this means, don't we? This will be old, Bridget the Marxist trying to get her mitts on anything to do with British history and trashing it all and saying that we're all horrible, nasty slave owners who shouldn't even have the right to walk the earth with the much nicer people who have come from other countries.
Yeah, and look, Mike, I've been involved under Margaret Thatcher, John Major, and more recently with Michael Gove in writing the national curriculum, in particular history, and I've been quite critical actually of what's been produced. So it's not perfect even now, but the problem with the national curriculum, Mike, is that it can be captured, and it's now being captured by the Labour Party, and they're going to use it as a vehicle for promoting woke ideology. It's quite simple, it's quite straightforward, and, you know, a lot of people are concerned about education at the moment, about standards. Well, things are going to get considerably worse because in the last 10 years, they have improved slightly, partly because government have adopted our policy, what we said they should be doing. It's improved slightly, but not as much as they say. We're now going to probably go backwards, and I think you'll find when the next international test results come out, we'll see us going backwards again. So very regrettable. It's ideological, and it's in many ways, you know, it's the opposite of what we should be doing.
Right. I mean, I've got two kids who went in the last 10 years, I suppose, through the state school secondary system and the back end of the primary system. And, you know, I don't think at any point when I was looking at what they were studying did I think, my goodness me, this has been written by a load of right-wingers. Absolutely crazy, isn't it? How biased it is against, minorities and the rest of the world, and how it's all about how great Britain is. It's not about that at all. It's never been like that.
No, I mean, that is the opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
The national curriculum for history, and I wrote a minority report on this as well, doesn't require the teaching of any specific event or personality from British history. Yes, you've got to teach British history, but you can do what you like with it. However, you do have to teach, for example, West African history and Islamic history. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but you have to. They're compulsory.
Right.
But as far as British history go, you don't have to teach World War II, don't have to teach Churchill, don't have to teach Henry VIII or the Reformation.
Right.
So it's already a free-for-all. We call it Sex Pistols history now. It's going back to get worse.
One of my kids was learning about the Vietnam War, which, you know, is all very well. It's kind of interesting period of history, but, you know, I can show the Deer Hunter and, you know, Full Metal Jacket for that, and it's fine. But, you know, I don't see why they have to do it in secondary school.
Look, I mean, what children need is a map of the past. They need to know the landmarks, like driving up a motorway almost, from the past to the present. You need to know where you're going. You need to know where you've come from. And the landmarks are pretty well recognised. You know, the Roman invasion, the Norman conquest, the Reformation, and so forth and so on. These are the landmarks. They should be taught. Churchill, World War I, World War II. These shouldn't be up for negotiation. And we should teach it in a way which I would say is traditional. But where it has a multiracial, multicultural element, by all means teach it. But what was the multiracial element at the Battle of Hastings, for example?
Right. But were they teaching as well that Churchill was a racist?
They're teaching that because it suits their narrative. I mean, to some extent, he reflected the views of his time. If you want a real racist, more racist than Churchill, look at the #1 Black Britain, voted #1 Black Britain. That's Mary Seacole. Mary Seacole is a heroic figure, in my opinion, but she was a great supporter of the British Empire. She put her life on the line to support the British Empire. She went to the Crimea, to the front line. She put her life on the line to support the British Empire. And she had very strong racist views. She used in her autobiography, she uses the N-word quite a lot. You know, she's one of these people who is put on a pedestal. Her statue's outside near Parliament, but she was a racist, and certainly more so than Churchill. But we don't talk about her because in those days the world was different. Look, Churchill had racist views. Of course, everybody had racist views in those days. He was also probably the greatest Englishman who ever lived.
Yeah, but also he gets blamed for, you know, the Bengali famine, which is a myth. You know, he didn't play any part in that. And that's the bit that I get, you know, it's one thing for you to say he was a racist, he had racist views. You know, you can argue that that was something of his time, but you certainly can't invent facts that then turn out to be untrue facts.
No, that myth has been exploded by a number of historians. There's a group at Cambridge called History Reclaimed, eminent professor. They've shown the whole thing is a myth. Churchill did what he could, actually, with regard to Bengal. It wasn't very much, but it was as much as he could. The climate change then, or the drought caused the famine. So, yeah, all the world's ills are loaded onto the shoulders of British people and now onto the shoulders of children in schools. They've got to learn to feel guilty. That's terrible.
Yeah, I know. And, of course, schools are going to get a lot worse, aren't they, before they get any better, because we already know, as a result of this VAT rise that's going on in the private sector, an awful lot of people are going to lose their ability to pay. So there's going to be 3,500 to 4,000 kids, maybe more than that, per sort of region of the country who are going to come out of private schools. We've already seen in Surrey, they can't accommodate them in the state system. They haven't got the space, so they're having to bust them out of Surrey to put them into state schools in neighbouring counties, which is going to create all sorts of mayhem. So it basically means if you're a parent who took your kids out of private school because you thought you couldn't afford it anymore, you're going to have to reacclimatise them. They're probably going to have to travel a long way to go where they want to go, and it's going to be ridiculous.
And they're doing this, Mike, in the middle of the school year.
Yeah.
It's spiteful, and it's class warfare.
It is,
and,
totally.
You know, we go on and on about we need more money for education. The fact is we spend more on education than most countries around the world.
Yeah.
There are many countries that spend considerably less but can do considerably better in terms of their standards. We need to improve the way we teach, and we need to improve the quality of the teaching. Not many people realise that the majority of staff in schools are not teachers. They're support staff, just as in hospitals. We should be supporting the doctors and the nurses, not the bean counters, not the administrators.
Yeah, I mean, my son, when he was in primary school, this was a few years ago, had a teacher who was off sick for the entire year, but who actually was running a YouTube channel while off sick, right? And eventually, it took about another year and a half, I think, after that first year of absence, for him to be taken off the payroll. So they had a teacher that they were paying who wasn't working, and they had to hire teachers in to do his work for him, thereby doubling the cost of the actual school.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of this going on, Mike. But look, there's some fantastic, dedicated teachers out there who I admire and I think are brilliant. But there are also, as in all walks of life, mediocre people doing teaching and also people who can't do the job. And they need to be weeded out. The only thing that really matters for children is the quality of the teachers.
Yeah.
No other country in the world goes around taxing education. We're doing that now to make it even more difficult for poorer kids to get into the best schools, because richer parents will now use the state sector. And we need to simply focus on raising the standards, but it's a heck of a job. We can look at countries in the Asia Pacific who are already 3 or 4 years ahead of us by the age of 15. Yeah. It's quite frightening.
Absolutely right. Finally, Of Mice and Men apparently has been taken off the curriculum in Wales for GCSE study students because of concerns about racism. Are we going to see, do you think, under Phillipson, a kind of a book banning list that gets produced so you can't teach books that they don't like the look of?
That's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to filter the curriculum so that only woke literature is promoted in school. There'll be some gestures towards Shakespeare, I guess. But look, it's already been watered down. I don't think the Tories have done such a great job. They haven't. They've presided over a slight improvement in reading. But look, when we hear the Tories talk about education, they say, oh, since 2010, we're doing so much better. I say to them, hang on a minute, go back to 2003 and then look at the results and then compare it with now. We actually went backwards from about 2003, improved slightly in the last few years. So, yeah, well, there's going to be a filtering. It's 1984. Come a bit late.
Yeah, shocking, absolutely shocking. Chris, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We'll talk some more, I'm sure, in the coming weeks as the school curriculum starts getting reshaped and as the school system starts absolutely falling apart. This is a good idea from Zipco. It says, Mike, Ivan here. Perhaps now is the time for a new channel, Talk History. preserving British history before the socialists rewrite all the books. I like the sound of that. We could run it as a separate channel off to the side, you know, maybe weekends only for the kids when they come back from school. How about this from Edward on the driving front? I saw a car coming out of Stansted Airport and it went the wrong way round a roundabout. Luckily it was 1 a.m, otherwise it could have been very nasty. Absolutely right. There's a lot of weird driving going on at the moment. We may have to look into this a little bit later on in the week. Coming up next, though, we're going to listen to James Price, who we spoke to a little bit earlier on today about the disaster that is this Labour government. Also, we're going to get another clip from Plank of the Year.
How many illegal migrants will enter the UK in 2025?
70,000 will come across the channel because this is going to get worse and worse and worse. We're going to end up with about 50,000 this year. Next year, I think 70,000. Labour have got no way of stopping this. No plans, no deterrence. They make this country more and more attractive for people to just jump onto boats.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 10 minutes to 10. Alex Phillips will be here just before 10 to tell us what's coming up on her show. How about this from Neil from the Forest of Dean? If I went out of my way to ruin British agriculture, help the Trojan horse of unknown dangers come across the English Channel, cause divide amongst ethnicities in this country, ruin the economy, give away anything that belongs to the British while displaying communist pictures on my wall and lying about everything, don't you think I'd be arrested for treason? Why is Starmer the Brit Harmer getting away with it? It's a good question. I don't know. And what's he going to do next? That's the real worry, isn't it? Now, as I said to you, if you haven't watched it yet, you've still got time to watch Plank of the Year because the year is not yet over. It's not over, of course, until midnight on New Year's Eve, which is tomorrow. So have a look at this. This is Jeremy Kyle nominating Hugh Edwards.
not about 6 and 7-year-old kids who are abused, so pedos like that could watch it. He should be in prison, so should the other, but he's an absolute, sorry, as a father, can't have it. Disgraceful. That is typical BBC. Samara, you've got, I mean, honestly.
No, you're completely right. I remember watching the coverage and they kept saying, his career is debatably over. What is there to debate?
Debatably
He's a
over.
pedophile with actually Class A, the worst
He's
images
admitted
and
it.
videos you can
There's
find.
no doubt about it. He's admitted his own guilt.
And the money we pay for our bloody licence fee has given him 200 grand since the BBC knew about the seriousness of the cases and still paid him.
And they've also, by the way,
he's been sacked.
Unbelievable stuff, that. Yeah, the BBC, very much a nomination there. Hugh Edwards as well. Of course, Keir Starmer is nominated. Sadiq Khan nominated as well. I think Ed Miliband makes it in there as well. Joe Biden, of course. Why not? He managed to not only not win a second term to be President of the United States of America, but he had to drop out after apparently not being compos mentis enough to do it. He's currently on the beach again, down in the Virgin Islands, wasting away the last few days and hours of his presidency. Probably just as well, in case he starts World War III, for heaven's sake. Now, earlier on in the show, we spoke to James Price, a former government advisor to the Tory party, of course, back in the day. He used to work for Nadeem Zahawi. Here's what he had to say about the state of this government. Let's talk about this mega poll, because I think even Labour hardliners will be shocked to see that if there was an election tomorrow, not only would they lose their majority, but they would lose 200 seats and possibly more. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, I mean, it's highly encouraging for everybody who believes in the future of this country and wants it to succeed. It's only been 6 months or so since Labour have got in, and even a kind of hardcore partisan like me didn't believe it would be this bad this fast. I mean, really, it's to the point where it's not even funny. It is the country that's really suffering, and all the kind of political point scoring that the Conservatives could be making, that Reform could be making, anybody else, it is just disastrous to see how badly it's gone, and I think the polls really reflect that. I think the really interesting thing about it is that Kemi Badenoch hasn't had an awful long time in as leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition yet. You've got Reform, who are still, let's be honest, working out what it is they really believe. They did very well in the election, but you've got 5 MPs there who probably think all quite different things about different issues. So the kind of united opposition isn't really there yet, and yet Labour are still facing catastrophic losses. I guess the big question is, if that result were to happen in 4 years' time, I don't think it will. I think it'll be even worse for Labour by a long way. The question is probably what happens to the Reform and Conservative votes. But if it doesn't, if it stays like that, what do Reform and the Conservatives do? Because unless they've got some kind of agreement before or after an election, it's the only way that you could see slimy Sir Keir Starmer get back into number 10.
Well, this is the thing, and I mean, there are some parts of the Conservative Party that still don't seem to quite get the fact that Reform is here to stay, that it's not just a sort of, you know, a fly-by-night operation. They're building something, and they're building it rather cleverly, and they're building it slowly and surely, you know. So the idea that I've seen some former Tory MPs over the weekend kind of dismissing anyone who wants to vote Reform and saying, well, if you vote Reform, you're just going to let Labour back in. So you can't do that. You must vote for us. Well, no, actually, because Reform would say, well, maybe it's the other way round. Maybe your wasted vote is a wasted vote for the Tories.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just can't stand that kind of attitude from some of my fellow members of the Conservative Party that says, well, we're the natural party of government. What on earth that stupid, fatuous statement actually means. The kind of arrogance, especially given how, frankly, we governed too many areas of this country for too long over the last 14 years. We've got absolutely no right to talk about that. I think on the point about standing aside or, you know, you're just letting Labour in, I think both parties are probably right. It looks like Reform is set to do very well in Wales. It looks like they're set to do very well in all those red wall seats that Boris and Dominic Cummings and people like that won back in 2019, and that then Rishi Sunak lost 6 months ago or so. Why would the Conservatives mount serious attempts to try and take those sorts of seats when Reform have a great chance of unseating Labour? Meanwhile, the Conservatives have got a hell of a lot of seats in, let's say, the southwest where I'm from, lots of rural seats that we lost both to the Lib Dems and to the Labour Party. There's 100-odd Labour MPs representing rural communities. I mean, what they're doing to rural communities now is absolutely disgraceful. And everybody...
It is quite extraordinary, isn't it? James Price there talking about what on earth is going on inside of this Labour government and whether there's any likelihood at all of anything good coming out of Downing Street in the coming weeks and months. I don't think so. Let's get a voice note from Emily.
Morning, Mike. It's Emily in Havant here again. Loving the show as usual. I just wanted to let you know, I studied Of Mice and Men at school, for 2 years. We did it for my GCSE. And it was a brilliant opportunity to discuss racism. And we were all taught about the historic racism, why it was wrong, why it wasn't something that, you know, we ever wanted to repeat. How are these children going to learn about racism and why it's bad?
Well, it's a very good question. And, of course, they're not. Because the people who want to re-educate children and who want to stop them from being exposed to things that they think are bad means that ignorance becomes the norm. And that's never good. Charlie, on the other hand, from Manchester says, when discussing reading lists, I thought of Mice and Men was a story about Sir Jim Ratcliffe taking over at Old Trafford. All the best. Well, there we are. And Stephen says this about the row between Kemi Badenoch and, of course, Reform and Nigel Farage. Ask someone from the Conservatives, 1, what are your reasons for attacking Reform in this way? 2, what effect do you expect this attack to achieve? And 3, why are you not attacking Labour policies and their impact? Well, there's 3 very good questions. I'm sure Alex Phillips might have an answer for all of them. Alex, very good morning.
Hi.
How are you? What's happened to your hand?
The claw. No, I did this before Christmas.
Did you?
I just snaggled it on my banister post, enthusiastically running upstairs, and have been utterly hopeless at protecting it. So I've just sort of carried on using it.
Is it painful?
Yeah, it's painful, and it's sort of now pointing a different direction. Like
my dog's got a claw like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeps growing the wrong way.
I wonder if I go out, if, like, my weird finger can divine for water.
It's possible.
Sort of...
Well, you are in the West Country now, so you could.
I do spend some time there.
You do, indeed. I tried to hack my finger off earlier when I was cutting some beef.
Yeah, but my bandage beats yours.
Yours does, yeah. Mine's more or less healed completely now. But I'm just wearing this in case it starts bleeding live on air.
My lip was bleeding live on air the other day.
Oh.
Yeah, I sort of had a bit of dry skin, and I sort of did that thing where I was like, oh, I better get rid of that. And it was just blood basically dripping off my chin like a rugby player.
Some people like that.
And then when Julia's here, we look like a like TB ward or something, you know, all of us together.
Yeah. I know.
We're like
so did you have a good Christmas
hospital.
anyway, or were you working all the time?
I was working and then just, you know, was around.
Get any good presents?
Yeah, some
Did
stuff. I got actually my favourite things. It's my birthday on Boxing Day as well, so I get the double whammy.
Many happy. Oh yes, I saw. I think you stayed in bed all day, didn't you?
Actually, yeah, I did stay in bed all day until like 5 o'clock.
Right,
and then
that's good.
Had a shower.
Yeah.
And then went out for some dinner and then got back in bed.
Good idea.
Yeah.
So
just
what was the present you got that you were going to say that you liked?
Oh, I got a tile from the Houses of Parliament, which I've wanted. They've been redoing all the lobby, and all the old original tiles when Parliament first built, they sell. And there's very few of them because it's a limited number, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted one.
That's nice.
I have a rock collection.
Okay. Well,
and I've got bits of my rock collection's now got a bit of the Berlin Wall and